housekeeping. Fire alarm arrangements. If there is a continuous alarm sounding at any point of the meeting, proceed out of the doors and back towards reception. Leave the building and congregate outside the Great Hall. Toilet facilities are available nearby. The room is fitted with an infrared hearing loop, which is permanently switched on. You'll either need a neck loop or use a hearing aid or headphones for amplified sound. Both are available on request from reception. Filming and broadcasting notice. The press and members of the public are permitted to film and broadcast the public sessions of this meeting. By entering and remaining at the meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and recorded, and to the possible use of those images and a recording for broadcasting purposes. Filming or recording is only permitted in this room whilst the meeting is taking place, so must stop when the meeting is either adjourned or closed. Filming is not permitted elsewhere in the building at any time. Item 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Jason Fazakerley, Portsmouth. Councillor Philip Lashbrook, Test Valley Borough Council. Councillor Martin Pepper, Gosport Borough Council. Councillor Ian Stevens, Isle of Wight Councillor, has a standing deputy. Ian Ward attending as a deputy. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Shirley Young, independent co-opted member. 2. Do members have any declarations of interest to make? Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 3. Item 3 is the Police and Crime Appointments and Co-option Report. This is pages 5 to 10 of your bundle. It's a standard report that we have every year. The report is from the Democratic Support Officer to the panel, and she sets out the membership of the panel for 2022 to 2023 municipal year, and the proposed appointment of a local authority co-opted members once the final political proportionality is confirmed. With respect to that report, do members have any comments or questions that may be fielded to Caroline? Thank you, panel. Members are now asked to vote on the following recommendations. The proposed recommendations are on page 5. That the panel notes its membership for the 2022 to 2023 municipal year as laid out in table 2 of this report. Second, nominations for local authority co-opted members will be sought following confirmation of the panel's appointment membership for 2022 to 2023, which will enable the panel to better meet the balanced appointment objective. These appointments will be considered by the panel at its next meeting in October 2022. At this point, I would indicate that Stuart Bailey has kindly agreed to put himself forward for Hart. So the only outstanding one is from the Isle of Wight. So that deals with that. Item 4, election of the chairman. I call for nominations and a seconder for chair to the panel until the AGM in 2023.
Proposing Simon Bound.
Thank you. Second. Job done. Oh, I was going to say, forgive me, I expected other nominations to be bounced forward at that point, but they're clearly not. Are there any other nominations, he says? Clearly not. Welcome aboard, Simon.
Thank you very much, panel. It's, I have to say, it's one of the most pleasurable jobs that I do as a councillor is be part of such a productive and effective police and crime panel for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. I feel humbled by your nomination and the overwhelming competition for this post. Thank you very much. So, now we come on to election of the Vice Chair. I wonder if I could call for nominations for Vice Chair of the panel until the AGM in 2023. Oh, I didn't see which hand first. Let's go with Margot first.
Proposing Shirley Young, Chairman.
Shirley Young. Do I have a seconder for Shirley? Thank you. Matthew, David. Dave Stewart. Do I have a seconder? Tonya, thank you very much. Do I have any other nominations for Vice Chair? No. In that case, we'll need to go to a vote. So if I could see a show of hands for Shirley, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you very much. And show of hands for Dave Stewart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm also see if there are any abstentions. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. As we can all clearly see the results of the election, Dave, you have been voted in as the Vice Chair. Would you like to come and join me? It's one of those high-pressure walks, isn't it, where somebody feels the need to fill the time. I'm not going to sing, I'm not going to dance, but feel free.
No, I do neither.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you very much. So then we come to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was on the 25th of April, which are available on pages 11 to 16. I wonder if I could ask the panel whether these minutes are confirmed as a correct record of that meeting. Yes, Dave?
Yep.
Yes, happy. Everybody who was here happy to agree them as correct. Brilliant, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Caroline. Then moving on to the next agenda item, which is Deputations and Questions. I wonder at this point whether I could invite the Commissioner and the Chief Executive to the top table, please.
Chairman, with your permission, may I invite Pete Jones, who is my performance manager, to come up to support with one of the questions, please?
Of course, Donna.
Thank you.
Welcome to the meeting, Donna, Jason and Pete. For this agenda item, we have received 2 public questions and 3 deputation requests for today's meeting. As far as how we're going to approach this,
Sorry, Chair, there is a bit of a feedback. I think it's Donna's still got her mic on.
Oh, sorry, Donna, can you... Thank you very much, Tonya. So I'm going to take the 2 public questions first. So I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Aaron Glendinning, Ms. Teresa Skelton and Mr. John Morse. I wonder if I could ask Mr. Glendinning, who has submitted 2 questions to today's meeting, to go to the podium, and I'll ask Mr. Glendinning to read his questions to the panel. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So my question number 1 is, the latest IOPC bulletin shows that the PCC is dealing with complaint appeals, which are known as reviews, in half the time, 21 days versus 42 days, than comparable forces. This potentially indicates that the quality of these PCC reviews may be less than that of comparable forces if only half of the average time is being spent on them. I'm asking the panel to use their powers under Rule 20 to request that the PCC provide an answer as to what the root cause of this exceptionally quick review time is, and provide reassurance that all laws and guidelines are and have always been fully adhered to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glendinning. What we've done is, of course, questions are to the panel, but as we have Donna here, we've been able to share that set of questions to Donna, and I believe, Donna, we'd quite like to ask you if you'd be able to respond today to those questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to start by saying how refreshing it is to actually have questions from members of the public. So thank you very much to Mr. Glendenning. The simple answer to this one is that the IOPC have actually only ever published 1/4 of figures, which is a bit of an anomaly in itself, which following Mr. Glendenning's question, I am actually going to communicate with them about that and write to the IOPC, because I think it's in the public interest that anybody is able to view that data, and only having 1/4 of data is not helpful at all. When we do get more performance data from the IOPC, or indeed whatever we are doing in our own work, we'll be publishing that on the OPCC website. So as soon as the IOPC go forward and publish more data, which we do have an indication that they may do, then we will make sure that's all transparent on the Hampshire OPCC website.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Glendenning, I wonder if you'd like to ask your second question.
The Elected Local Policing Bodies Amendment Order 2021 guidance for police and crime commissioners require that the PCCs must publish the most recent IOPC quarterly complaints data for their force and the IOPC annual statistics report, alongside a narrative setting out how the PCC is holding the Chief Officer to account and the PCC's assessment of their own performance in carrying out their other complaint handling functions. Although a generic narrative has been published, there is no reference to the performance data contained in the IOPC's annual complaints report, thereby not fulfilling the statutory obligations, in my opinion, or indeed the purpose as set out in the order. For example, I would expect to see commentary on how the PCC is holding the Chief Officer to account when the latest bulletin shows that Hampshire Constabulary have not conducted a single investigation of the 1,536 complaints made against them in the fiscal year 2020 to 2021. Again, I'm asking the panel to use their powers under Rule 20 to request that the PCC fulfills their statutory obligations under this order and provides the required narrative on the IOPC complaints data for this area.
Thank you, Mr. Glendenning. Commissioner, would you be able to respond for us, please?
Thank you very much. And in terms of this question, which again I think is incredibly thoughtful and very helpful, and I very much welcome it, because this is what we're all here to do. We're going to do this as a tag team, if that's okay, between Pete and I. So Pete's going to give you the sort of first part of the answer, and then I'm going to conclude with some comments. But before I hand over to Pete, I just want to say, which will quantify what he's going to, contextualise what he's going to say, is that, of course, with complaints data, you're always sort of a year to 18 months behind, because they're always retrospective in terms of the reports. But on that note, I'm going to hand over to Pete.
Thank you. So just to put some context around how the system works without going into too much detail, if I may. So the new complaint regulations came into force on the 1st of February 2020. And Hampshire Constabulary started using a new system in line with that, which then in turn reports through to the IOPC, and that's the case for all the forces up and down the country. Prior to that, Hampshire Constabulary were using a different system, again in line with many forces within the UK. However, since that new system's come into force, the old system is not accessible in order to provide the data to the IOPC. So again, this is something that has happened elsewhere with other forces. So the information is missing in the report because it wasn't captured at the time due to the switchover of the systems. So from the 1st of September 2021, following that software upgrade, then that investigation data field from the question that is said is missing became available to them to record and forward on to the IOPC. So that's just the context around the system and the software that sits behind the data that's collected.
Thank you very much. So without wanting to mislead the panel in any way, of the complaints that are made, the 1,536, it is entirely possible that there have been, of those 1,536 complaints, a number of those that went on to PSD and then onto the IOPC. But because of this switchover, which a number of forces did on the software, the IOPC don't have that data to be able to publish it, and the Home Office are aware of this. But I do think it's a very good point, and it's definitely worth, it's very worthy of that public being aware of that and raising attention of that. Now, what I do want to do, just if I can, Chair, just for another one or 2 minutes, is just just give you some more up-to-date information that we do have from the new system, to give you some confidence that the Hampshire constabulary complaints teams are not referring things, because of course that is, I'm sure, how, if you remember the public looking at that information, you would take that, and that is honestly not the case. So what happens with complaints is it's 4 stages effectively. So complaint category number 1 is what they call an outside Schedule 3, and that means that there is basically in informal dissatisfaction, let's say crimes not investigated satisfaction, or an officer hasn't got back to me, it's sort of a casework type issue, and they that is stage number 1. Stage number 2 under Schedule 3 is, for example, where what we call not investigated, which is where you might have an investigation might include incivility or dealt with by their complaints resolution unit. So stage 1, complaints come in. If it ticks box number 1, it moves on to the Hampshire Constabulary Complaints Resolution Unit. This is the new process over the last 2.5 years. The next stage after that, if the Complaints Resolution Unit think, yeah, no, there's a case to answer here, something's not right, it then goes on to the Police Standards Department, PSD, and if PSD look at it and think, we're not happy with this, it then goes on to the IOPC. And what they do is they keep my office aware of all of these as they go through the processes. Now, if the IOPC look at that and investigate, they will then say either yes, we're going to investigate, or no, we're not, and we're going to send it back to Hampshire Constabulary to investigate, or we don't think there's a case to answer. But throughout that process, when you come to the end of each juncture, the right of appeal then obviously comes to the individual to come to me as Police Crime Commissioner. So from the 1st of September of last year through to the 30th of June this year, so the most up-to-date information we can give you, there were 2,324 complaints that were dealt with under, let's call it, Category 1, that's Schedule 3, complaint resolution. 319 of those then went on to the complaint resolution unit. Of those, a further 184 then went on to PSD, and of those, 88 complaints were then referred on to the IOPC. So you can see that there is a filtering process, yes, but there are things working their way through the due process as they should be.
Thank you, Donna, and your team for those responses. Mr. Glendenning, can I invite you to ask one supplementary or follow-up question to the panel, and it does need to be on the same subject.
It's more of a statement, actually, which is that the process, as is defined in law, is that a person makes a complaint, a member of the public makes a complaint. Hampshire Constabulary will initially deal with it, unless it's very serious allegations, will deal with it at this stage 1 that the Commissioner has spoken about. Hampshire Constabulary can decide to record it and move it to stage 2, but also can a member of the public, if they're given that opportunity. That isn't a decision that Hampshire Constabulary can make. It will then get resolved at stage 3 by PSD. Only for the most serious offences like death in custody will it be automatically referred to the IOPC. So that last number that was, so I think that's incorrect, what was mentioned by the PCC, that the referrals to the IOPC normally happen and substantially happen when it's a serious complaint and the complainant is dissatisfied by the outcome that's been given by Hampshire PSD.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glendenning. You may not have asked it as a question, but I can see the Commissioner has taken it as one. Donna, did you want to respond to that?
Well, I'm not a policing expert, and I have got someone who is sat next to me who was 30 years service and worked in the Police Standards Department, which is why I've dutifully employed him. The Hampshire Constabulary, I'm right in thinking, and please correct me Pete if I'm making a misleading statement here, can automatically refer direct to the IOPC regardless of whether a member of the public is happy with the outcome. Is that correct? Yeah. Where there is a really serious breach, I mean, you know, for example, death after police contact. If the police go to a property, domestic abuse case, and they leave, and then several hours later, a person, let's say a lady, loses her life in that situation, because there has been police contact, that the police automatically refer themselves to the IOPC, even if there is nothing wrong. So the police are actually referring themselves to the IOPC monthly about things, because that is the due process. I know I don't mean to conflate away from the point that Mr. Glendenning's made, because actually they do also, on public complaints, refer themselves where they know they've done wrong, even if the member of the public is not asking for that. If there is an absolute clear breach, that can go forward without the member of the public asking for it. I hope that's okay.
Thank you, Donna, for that response. Now we've finished our questions. We're now going to stay with deputisations. So I will just say, to just clarify for deputies, that you will have 5 minutes each to speak, and we'll be told when you have 1 minute remaining. Whilst there will be no response to the matter spoken upon today through these deputations, we do thank you all for attending and speaking to us. First of all, we have Mr. Glendinning.
Thank you. My deputation concerns 2 points regarding agenda item 14, annual complaints report. The first point, I refer to bullet point 5, which outlines the panel's delegations of initial complaint handling, complaints regarding the Police and Crime Commissioner, to the Chief Executive of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Whilst that is a valid model under the elected local police bodies regulations, I would like to highlight that the current Chief Exec was during 2021. As the Crime Commissioner has said, there is a report and lag in the data, was a senior police liaison officer at Hampshire Constabulary. Hypothetically, if anyone were to raise a complaint against a PCC in respect of any alleged statutory failure, we've heard potentially one example, to hold the Chief Constable to account for the force's complaint performance, given the delegation arrangements just mentioned, this would unavoidably overlap with the Chief Exec's sphere of influence in his previous role as a senior police officer with the constabulary that the PCC is charged with providing oversight and scrutiny on. This creates a scenario whereby the panel have delegated the initial handling of a sensitive complaint area to someone who could reasonably be said to have a conflict of interest. It would be somewhat akin to Sue Gray deciding whether to progress a complaint of a work event that she had attended. I believe it would be in everybody's interest for the panel to review this delegation arrangement and promote public confidence that the complaints against the PCC, which concern her statutory obligations in scrutinising the force, are handled without any conflict of interest, perceived or otherwise. And I would state that I haven't personally seen any conflict of interest. I'm just aware of the potential that it could be there. Point 2 is the annual complaint report provides no evidence that the panel scrutinises and supports the PCC on our oversight of force complaints, and there are critical areas arising from the IOPC report that need to be challenged. It might be that I just cannot find it, but I can see no evidence that this minuted recommendation from the PCP meeting on the 7th of February 2020 was ever acted upon. This is the recommendation, that the panel requests an annual update from the PCC monitoring the right to review process and scrutinising how the PCC is holding the Chief Constable to account in relation to the handling of complaints locally. As the PCC is fully aware, I believe there are significant issues with the police complaint system in Hampshire, issues which disproportionately impact the most vulnerable in society. I've given up my time this morning because I believe the OPC and this panel could be serving the people in Hampshire much better in how they apply oversight to the monitoring of complaints against the county's police force. I thank you for your time, and I'm available if any panel member or the panel would like to discuss in more detail. I do have a lot more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glendinning. If I could ask you to take a seat, thank you very much. And I'm now going to call Mr. Morse up to the podium.
Good morning, councillors and others. I'm addressing now item 16 on the agenda. I have some comments from the standpoint of an ordinary member of the public. I've now attended 2 meetings of the Complaints Subcommittee. Both seemed to me the committee couldn't act fast enough to kick out the public and the press. Now, I'm in no way sure that the provisions of the Local Government Act, which are invoked for this, in any way compel so total an exclusion of, or far-reaching exclusion of the public as I've observed. I'm sceptical that such total exclusion is necessary to protect the truly exempt information of public employees. But even if such apparently OTT measures were necessary, that's not entirely the point. Speaking again from the perspective of a member of the public, it's a question of the basic attitudes I pick up on inside the heads of CSC members, Complaints Subcommittee members. Public's being completely shut out of any knowledge of what's happening in the administration of our police at that level by these means. Joe and Josephine Public in the street are banned from any meeting of the subcommittee, and they can't find out afterwards what a complaint has been about if they even know there was a hearing in the first place. This can't be right. The Complaints Subcommittee is part of a chain of agencies supposed collectively to keep the police machine to the straight and narrow. In too many people's experience, and we speak to a lot of people, this hasn't been happening. It certainly hasn't in Hampshire, where problems of misconduct and corruption in the police have been endemic for years, with little apparent will to deal with them at any level. I think everybody here will be familiar with this item, which appeared in the Hampshire Chronicle, which informs us that only 0.4% of all complaints led to misconduct proceedings in the year 2021 onwards. The CSC does neither the public nor, in the end, itself or the panel any favours by keeping its activities a deep, dark secret, out of sight and sound from the public it's meant to serve. The public needs to know what the PCC they voted and paid for is doing, whether he or she is guilty of shortcomings and what those shortcomings may be. No better way of doing this than throwing a meeting of the subcommittee open to the public when they hold a hearing, and things are likely to be done much better by the subcommittee itself if they know the public is watching. In any case, I'll just say this: the Commissioner is a public figure who should be made to live in a goldfish bowl, and it's the role of the Complaints Subcommittee to do that. They don't seem to want to do this at all. They seem to want to do the opposite. From what I've seen, this is the atmosphere I pick up from their proceedings. All you have to do is look at the great big section 3, headed method, in this that we have here somewhere, doesn't really matter, which is all about getting rid of the public and how to do it, pretty much. As for the issue of membership of the subcommittee, I suggest it's not good for any of them to
One
serve
more minute, Mr.
for
Morse.
too long. I know that one or two have been there for quite a few years. Former police officers should always, as a matter of principle, be excluded from membership because there's going to be a conflict of interest there. And I just remind you, everybody round this table here, that you're all beholden to the very same public that your subcommittee seems so eager to exclude. Most of you are elected councillors, some of you are not. Your whole operation is paid for by that public. For the record, I do know that there are some PCP members at least who do want a better state of things. Welcome the public, welcome your critics from the public. They could turn out in the end to be your very best friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morse. If I could ask Ms. Skelton to come to the podium, please. Good morning, Ms. Skelton. You also have 5 minutes. I'll give you 1 minute's notice towards the end, if that's okay.
Okay. I've got the complaint reports here. It's a public document. It says little. It is hard to see how it tells the panel itself anything much. It tells the public nothing worth knowing. It tells us nothing more about the last year than that 3 complaints were recorded against the PCC and 4 against her deputy, and that there had been a resolution without giving the least details. Only in the case of Luke Stubbs on the 9th of February 2022 were any details of the complaint or what it was about published. The whole process is secretive almost in its entirety. In the Luke Stubbs case, the proceedings were still sufficiently secretive. that it was impossible to find out whether or not Mr. Stubbs himself knew the identity of the complainant against him. A freedom, there it is, a freedom of information request revealed that this information is not recorded. It would be appalling if action can be taken by the subcommittee on the basis of completely anonymous accusation or complaint. There is a public interest in knowing whether this happened. In another case some time ago, a complainant wanted the minutes of a supposed subcommittee meeting. These were not forthcoming. The then PCC had been complained about for having knowledge of a crime but failing to get the Chief Constable to act. Only 2.5 years later, during a civil action against her brought by Hampshire County Council, did the complainant discover that her complaint had been rejected without any meeting of the subcommittee, but solely after a brief email exchange. It further emerged from the same disclosure process ordered by Judge Stewart in the Civil Division of the Winchester Courts that the PCC had misled the complaint subcommittee members with a letter suggesting he had made serious efforts to respond to her issues. In fact, he had never answered a single one of her letters, but the subcommittee took his word at face value. All of the above material was given exempt status. That's it there. 2 pages. It was kept from the complainant, who therefore did not know she had been lied about by the PCC. In fact, it was exactly the kind of thing that should be on the public record and fully reported by the complaint subcommittee. In the upshot, when she persisted, the complainant was styled unreasonable or vexatious. This led to the chain of events in which the council launched their action against her, which ran to nothing in court after up to £70,000 of public money had been wasted.
1 more minute.
Nothing that couldn't have been avoided with a little bit of openness in the dealings of the complaint subcommittee. Why not serve the public properly? Report what you recalled to the fullest extent. Get rid of the secrecy. By the way, the Chief Constable of Hampshire committed perjury, got away with it, and possibly gained from it. This was because there is no effective complaint system. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Miss Skelton. I'm conscious that we don't respond to deputisations. Commissioner, you wanted to make a...
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to clarify for newer panel members that the she's there were not me. This is 3 or 4 years ago, before my time.
Thank you. So if I could thank those members of the public that have joined us. Thank you for sharing your comments. You are more than welcome to remain and observe the rest of today's meeting. So we can then now move on to item 8, which is the Chairman's announcements. First of all, I'd like to welcome those new members of the panel that have joined us. I would also like to thank those who have not returned to the panel. So that's Councillor Dave Ashmore, John Beavis, Trevor Cartwright, Ken Munchamp, Councillor Andrew Joy and Councillor Sarah Vaughan. I also will just share with the panel that, so we can put it on public record, that we wrote as a panel to the Commissioner following our April meeting, highlighting the panel's concern and expectations regarding information shared with the panel. We thank Donna for her response and for recently attending a meeting of the Plan Working Group to expand further upon her intention to share information with the panel. Thank you very much, Donna. Then we move on, because that's the end of my announcements, to item 9, which is the Commission's announcements. Donna.
Chair, thank you very much indeed. And colleagues, old and new, it's a pleasure to be here and to see new panel members. So thank you to those of you who are here, and I look forward to working with you very much over the year ahead. Today I have with me, for those of you who haven't met him before, Jace Kenny, who is Chief Executive of the Opcc. We've got Pete Jones, who is our Business Programmes Projects Manager at the Opcc. We've also got Andy Lowe, who's the Chief Finance Director over there, and Roger Wood, DCI Roger Wood, who is Staff Liaison for the Opcc as well. Between us, I know there are some financial questions on the agenda today, Chair, so we may well be drawing on the Finance Director if that's okay, if needed. I want to start by saying apologies that the lunch has been kept, only because I was inviting you to meet the new executive team in my office. One has had COVID, is coming out the back end of it. The other one is actually on annual leave, and that wasn't realised at the time the invite went out. Many of you have already met Jace, so it would make more sense to do it in the future if that's okay. In terms of the written reports, Chair, you've just made reference to that. Thank you so much. I know Councillor Power and Mrs Shirley Young have made some really good points previously. We have gone away and reflected on that, and you'll know at your last panel meeting and the one before that, so over the last 6 months, have been seeking some greater clarification for you. And Chair, I'm very grateful of your letter, because half of the old panel, particularly previous Councillors Beavis and Cartwright, loved my extensive verbal updates, but I do appreciate that doesn't work for everybody. So half the panel liked it, half would prefer it more written. I hope now we're going to be in a sweet spot between the two, which would be really good, but we are certainly going to be bringing you the written information in advance as you require, so you can scrutinise that fully. And we will endeavour to do our best, and if we can adapt that throughout the year in any way, you'll feed that back to me, Chair, I know. So in terms of, I would really welcome colleagues to come and have a look at the Opcc team, come and meet them. It would be really good, particularly the newer members of the panel. Please come and do that. We'd love you to come and spend some time with us if you think that would be useful. Previously, I know I might have invited colleagues out on operational visits. You came out on the Marine unit with me. I did speak about the call centre, but the call centre is about to go through a big refurb, so that may have to get put off till next spring, but I would really like to invite you to come and visit custody with me. For those of you that haven't done that, I'll be in contact through you, Chair, if that's okay. So since we last met, we have had the opening of that police station in Bitton. I did tell you that I was going to be opening a new police station in my first year, addressing increasing visibility. There are more things coming. I know we're going to go through that further in the agenda, so I'm not going to cover that in too much detail now. And I know we're coming back to the office savings, but just to re-clarify, since our last meeting, the confirmation that I've saved £750,000 through the Opcc budget direct by moving my office location and reducing my staff headcount. And that money will obviously be going back into operational policing services. I'd like to thank Simon, Dave, Leslie and the others for coming to, for working with me and coming to, Sarah Vaughan came to the opening of the new police station. Yeah, so I think that's probably that. So moving on then, I've held my first PCC Awards. Many of you attended and actually gave an award, as you did, Chair. So thank you for your support of that. And it was a really good way for us to be able to highlight best practice, both through volunteering, special police officers, but also police staff and warranted police officers, and importantly the third sector, who are doing an amazing job, street pastors for example. I have really stepped up the pace in terms of raising the awareness of VORG and the nighttime economy risks, particularly in our university towns and cities. I did a big sort of feature piece with a local BBC on that one, really trying to raise the awareness and keeping particularly women and girls safe in our counties. Moving on from that, I've been a national spokesman on high-profile sentencing of police officers working in a corrupt way in terms of Wayne Couzens. I think policing in the UK has never been more under the spotlight than it is right now, and I think it's important the deputations we've had today, you know, that just demonstrates the strength of public feeling around people expecting the very highest standards from their police force, and I think that's right and proper, and I welcome the challenge. I think it's healthy and it's the way it should be. I have awarded my annual grants round. That closed in March. We did the scoring and the money started going out the door into the new financial year from April onwards. That's just over £1 million, and we made sure we had a good geographical and specialism threat. But of course, one of my focuses, as you'll see in the police and crime plan, is around trying to prevent crimes rather than yes, we need to be supporting victims, but actually prevention is better than cure. So we're really trying to work with some of our most troubled cohorts, perpetrators of domestic abuse, and those teenage habitual knife carriers, very often teenage boys, who are being hurt and hurting others. I've done lots of lobbying and feeding into the Ministry of Justice over the Public Order Bill through the Police Crime Sentencing Courts Act, and I've spoken on national media about that as well. The Opcc Modern Day Slavery exhibition continues around the county. It's probably been to several of your areas. If it's not, it's coming your way very soon, and also going to the Isle of Wight as well. So we're quite proud of the Modern Day Slavery exhibition. Many people know the phrase modern day slavery, but they don't truly know how it may affect their own community, be it a car wash, a nail bar. If you haven't been and visited it, I would really encourage you to do that. Project Foundation has been launched, and this is the Hampshire Constabulary response to my police and crime plan priorities in terms of addressing and pursuing, I should say, perpetrators of domestic abuse. There has been information shared on my social media and by the force, so please have a look at Project Foundation, I should say, not Operation Project Foundation. Moving on, the National Police Race Action Plan was published by the National Police Chiefs Council, and this was very much focusing on is policing institutionally racist or not in England and Wales. And a very high-profile barrister called Amambola Johnson was commissioned by the NPCC to do that report. Olivia and I issued a joint statement here for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So if anyone would like to see that, please let me know, and you can have mine and the Chief Constable's thoughts on the National Police Race Action Plan. And I'm happy, perhaps at a subsequent meeting, if you so wish, Chair, we could put it on the agenda of me explaining to you how I'm ensuring that the force are doing what they need to do in terms of the requirements of equality, diversity and inclusion and national legislation. Operation Septa has taken place. For those of you that have followed Operation Septa, it happens twice a year. It's an intensification week to tackle and intercept knives being carried, particularly those young people that are being exploited and are pushing drugs around the county, but particularly a crackdown on knives. It was very successful. I think it led to 16 charges. I think I'll caveat that one. I'm off the top of my head. I've carried on my work with rural communities. There's barn meetings now going on. If you represent a rural community or know anyone that does, your council has a rural area. Barn meetings are now being set up by the Country Watch team, and that is certainly something that myself and the Hampshire Constabulary will be very happy. We had one in Winchester, one in Basingstoke, one in East Hampshire. And I think there's one coming up in Andover Test Valley area. But, you know, if you have rural areas, please do get in contact. Criminal Justice Week came and went. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. Last couple of points, Chair, if I may. I have issued a statement nationally, jointly with the Deputy Mayor of London, Sophie Linden, on the Information Commissioner's Office report on rape victims being treated as suspects and how the new end-to-end rape review, government's end-to-end rape review commissioned by the Home Secretary, and the outcomes of that are being implemented. I've given, I've made deputations, you know, at select committees, and I did work with the National BBC on that one as well. Our name change from Hampshire Constabulary to Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary was formally laid down before Parliament on the 6th of June and was debated in the House of Lords, I think, 2 days ago. So should be going back to the Commons. I'm hoping that that will come to the end before the end of parliamentary recess, and then we'll get voted through in the new in September. So that is the timescale we're working to for the formal name change for the police force. We've had a bit of toing and froing with the Met Police. They, in terms of the National Police Uplift programme, they have offered a £5,000 golden handshake sweetener incentive to officers that transfer from other forces into them, including detectives, which is a concern for all police forces. And of course, those of us that surround the Metropolitan Police were called the donut forces, which is perhaps not the politest phraseology, but there you have it. We have all made quite strong representation to the Home Secretary and to the policing, or the previous policing minister, Minister Malthouse, on this. We are concerned, and we have also written to Sadiq Khan about it as the ultimate Commissioner of Policing Services in London. Actually, I think our effect here will be very, very manageable. I'm happy to expand if you have any questions throughout the meeting. I've held 2 meetings now with council leaders across the county on unauthorised encampments and how we can work together to try and make sure we are adhering to the requirements in the Human Rights Act for people that choose to live and travel as part of their way of life, but also working, factoring in the new legislation that's come out of the Police Crime Court Sentencing Bill. And we had the one of those meetings on Monday of this week, so me acting in my capacity as convener across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. In terms of police performance, I've been doing a lot of work thanks to now having Pete on my team, and we're going to share some of that information with you today around going into the depth. Councillor Power, we discussed this previously. I hope today this is going to be a good foundation and we can carry on building on that with you all around trust and confidence in policing, how we're holding them to account, oversight and scrutiny, etc. I've talked about that nationally. And the 2 final points from me. Section 28 of the Courts Act came into force on the 28th of May. What that means is that victims of rape and serious sexual assault, referred to as RASO cases, it is now possible that rape victims and serious sexual assault victims are able to be interviewed to give their evidence in chief and cross-examination via video. It gets recorded at the point they are kind of doing their police statement and reporting it. It means that they then don't need to go to court for the trial 6, 12, 18 months later. It allows them to get on with their recovery much quicker, and often apparently it does help to enhance the quality of their evidence. So that is now, we are one of the first forces in the country through our Crown Courts to be offering Section 28 to victims. I will keep you abreast of how that goes. It's something I'm keeping a very close eye on. And 2 weeks ago on the Isle of Wight, as it happens, we think that we had the very first charge brought in the country under the new non-fatal strangulation law, which became law on the 7th of June. We had a charge pretty much the following week. That, Chair, is my Commissioner's updates.
Very comprehensive. Thank you very much, Donna. I know it's always a bit of a challenge probably for Caroline's typing to keep up and the rest of us to, I'm sure Caroline would really appreciate your notes. Dave, you've got one quick question on the Commissioner's announcement.
It's 2 things, really, and maybe Councillor Ward, who's representing the island today, may comment on this. I was going to say thank you as an island resident for the following through on what you said about the road policing unit. It is back, and I can tell you it's been very well received. Also to the officers who must have been involved across from the county in the festival, which came back this year, had massive numbers, and I think you should put credit there. And then hopefully saying thank you in the future planning for the Tour of Britain, which arrives in September. I don't know if Councillor Ward wants to add to that. You may want to ask him.
I would like to reinforce everything that Councillor David Stewart has said. The name change is something that the islanders really appreciate. It's something that's been under the skin for decades, actually, and now that the Commissioner has made that move to officially change it, I won't say there'll be celebrations in Newport, but I'm sure you'll understand what I mean. Everybody will appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, if we can move on to item 10, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office arrangements, which you'll find in the pack on pages 17 and 26. I wonder, Donna, if I could invite you and your team to give us an update.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'd like to thank Simon, Shirley, I think it was Matthew and Narinda, I think I've missed anyone else, the subcommittee who have run through this with us and had that briefing as a subcommittee prior to today. And actually the feedback that we had from that was incredibly helpful, and I hope will mean that the presentation we give to you today is just tweaked and improved that little bit more as well. So thank you very much, as I say, for their feedback. I've got Andy here, Finance Director, as I say, in terms of the cost, if there are any questions around any of the money bits, in which case I may be asking him and Pete to do a quick switch over, but Pete, please do stay there for a minute. I'm not ejecting you in any way. And also I'd like to start by thanking Jace as the Chief Executive for his immense support for the transformation that's happened throughout the Office of the Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner. It has been an enormous change. It has been a significant piece of work, particularly for him coming in and starting that literally day one, week one. I am incredibly grateful, and what I do feel now, sat here in front of you, panel, is able to say that I feel, you know, comfortable, happy and confident that I'm able to fulfil my statutory duties in the way that you would expect me to. And that is what we're all here to ensure. Okay, so on to the office structure. Of course, the two previous commissioners, we've had two, you know, I am the third of 3 terms. We've had change at every juncture. Really hope we don't have change again at the next Police and Crime Commissioner elections in May 24. But every PCC has their own take, their own stance, their own, you know, focus on what they want to do. A PCC may be very focused on domestic abuse, very focused on youth support, you know, absolutely bit between the teeth around, you know, improving standards in the police force and getting to the bottom of complaints, corruption and points, you know, that have been made. And I do think that that is certainly a focus for me to ensure I'm instilling public confidence that I'm doing that. So, now, as the new commissioner, it was a time for me to have a foot on the ball moment, for me to look at our team. That's one of Jace's phrases, which is why he's smiling. I've borrowed it. But genuinely, for me to have a look at the team and align that to my priorities and see if I had the skill sets that I needed and the capability within the team to deliver at the pace that I wanted to, and to make sure I was delivering the requirements that you are asking of me, and as are the public. I also looked at the size and cost of our office in comparison to other OPCCs around the country. Of course, some forces are very small. We are one of the largest. We are the 5th largest, if you include the Met, in the country out of 43 forces. So you would expect us to have a bigger OPCC, but I still believe that the office that I inherited was large, was too large. So I wanted to reduce the costs, but make it a very fit-for-purpose organisation. So ensuring I could meet my police and crime plan objectives and ensuring I could meet my statutory duties, reducing and driving up best value for public money. I will always do that, being a banker and coming from the private sector. In my public life, I always want to ensure that I'm driving best value for public money. We all pay a lot of tax, and I'm conscious that it gets spent the way it should be, but also, of course, delivering on efficiencies and improving on effectiveness. So we then had the opportunity then to also look at corporate risk management, good governance, and obviously holding to account of the force. I need to make sure I've got the right team around me who know the force inside out and back to front, cue Mr. Kenny and Mr. Jones, to help me making sure that there are no skeletons buried, there are no corners uncovered, and that I'm getting to the bottom of what I need to do on behalf of the public. And actually, from a leadership perspective, as a civic leader in this counties, I think it's the right thing that I should be doing. Moving on to the financial analysis. So this slide here shows you the costs, and I'm not going to dwell too much on this. I have gone through this with you at a previous meeting. I'm going to give you a quick canter through this, but of course, if there are more questions, we do have the finance director here. So you will see that we are saving £704,000 per year. That is made up of 2 key things. One is the staffing savings that are coming from the restructured team that I now have, and the second one is coming from me moving the office from Winchester to Fareham. The office here costs just under £250,000 a year, as I've shared with panel members before, but for new panel members, rent, business rates and parking under the law courts, it's expensive. The new office is £65,000 a year, and with business rates, I think it's another £20,000. So, and free parking. So it is much cheaper. And of course, the money that I'm saving is going to be going back into the huge demand for operational policing services. So that's where we're at. Now, of course, when restructuring your team and making it smaller, you have to pay redundancy costs. So you can see on there the £558,000, which is the totality of the redundancy cost that we offered. And we had a VR scheme that we opened when we started the 4-week consultation. That started on the 19th of January and ended on the 28th of February from memory. And then we opened a VR scheme, which is slightly more generous than the compulsory. And I'm really pleased to say that I think, with the exception of 2 or 3 people, Jace will correct me, actually most people took a VR package, which obviously was enormously helpful. Payback period, I thought previously I advised the panel before we'd got to the conclusion of the numbers, I thought the payback period was going to be 13, 14 months. Actually, it's 11.8 months, so it's actually a little bit quicker than we thought. So I'm going to hand over to Jace to take you through the structure.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Chair. Members, so just to echo Donna's point, I'm extremely grateful for having had the opportunity to provide a much more detailed input to the plan working group on what we're going to go through in a moment, back on the 23rd of June. So what you can see on the slide, hopefully in front of you there, is essentially the executive and the senior leadership team within the new OPCC model. The slide also reflects towards the bottom right there, you can see our shared services arrangements, particularly in relation to the finance functions that Don has already alluded to. Essentially, what would I like to highlight in relation to this slide? 6 previous senior leadership posts have become 3 professional and accredited post holders. And the new OPCC is essentially configured into 3 interrelated portfolios. Moving from left to right there, you can see criminal justice, commissioning and partnerships, estates and facilities management, and business is the final one. And again, this also represents improved good governance on our behalf in support of everything that Donna is seeking to achieve. I think the next slide, please, if you would, please. Thank you. So the next 3 slides, which I'll do in fairly high level, noting that you've had these in advance, represents essentially the newly configured OPCC for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Just to add on a little bit in terms of what Donna's already said, a full mapping exercise was undertaken right at the very, very outset of the change process in order to rationalise what and how we should be performing our functions. This included a very detailed review in relation to knowledge, experience and skills versus functions and requirements, and resulted also in the creation of new role profiles. Those were, again, hopefully to provide a degree of reassurance, were independently and comparatively assessed to ensure value for money by Hampshire County Council's policy and rewards team. Noting what Donna's already said, the teams are deliberately lean. Deliberately so, just to emphasise that, focused on efficiency and effectiveness. And I think it's fair to say that we also have a very good appreciation now of our organisational capabilities. The approach very much through the senior leadership team and the executive will be based, well, essentially is a risk-based approach to capacity and delivery of everything that we are responsible to do. So in terms of the slide that you can see in front of you, this represents the business portfolio. I won't do the detail of the key priorities that are listed on the right-hand side of the slide, or rather slides, and what you can see there in terms of the functions that are responsibility of the business portfolio relate to communications, stakeholder management, performance and information, and noting the deputations, complaints, compliance, and also in relation to governance there. Police and crime, delivery of the police and crime plan in relation to the programmes and projects management also sits within the business portfolio, as does a relatively lean degree of executive and business support. The next slide, if you would. Thank you. Again, in fairly high level, the criminal justice commissioning and partnerships portfolio sees this portfolio configured in relation to, yes, criminal justice commissioning, communities and partnerships, but I was also going to highlight there the violence reduction unit, which I again think might be an offer that we would like to make in terms of some further detail if that's what the panel would like, noting that the Commission has been successful in terms of central government application for additional funding to support local crime reduction. And obviously in relation to young people there as well. Is within this portfolio. Finally, noting some of the updates that the panel has previously had in relation to estates and facilities management, I think this is absolutely critical in terms of discharging some of those functional, but probably more importantly, some statutory responsibilities there. And you will see professionally accredited people that have joined the organisation, in particular in relation to hard and soft services in support of ultimately everything the Commissioner is trying to achieve in relation to estates and facilities management. I will pause. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you very much.
I normally expect you to summarise at the end, Donna. Sorry, I wasn't expecting such a stop there. So what I'm going to do is open up questions to members of the panel. I do have on notice some questions, and first for a couple of questions I'm going to go to Tonya.
I've got 2 tabled, but there's another one that I just wanted out of the presentation we've just had. I think I read that there was £558,000 that's been given for redundancies. kind of find that figure astounding because we've only had a PCC since 2014. And I would have thought if that's being used for redundancy, it's an awful lot of money.
Thank you. 2012, 10 years, 10 long years. Yeah, a number of people that come to work in the PCC office come from local government, and if they have that continuity of service, they bring with them their previous lengths of service. So you're absolutely right. One person, I think, had 21 years service, but unfortunately, as the employer, we have to pick up the whole liability. It's a good point.
Okay, just getting that understanding because somebody else reads that is, wow. Okay. So how long will it be until the new structure is operating effectively?
I'm going to defer to Jace on this one, but effectively now, but he will give you a bit more detail on that, but it is in place.
Happy to give a lot more detail if that would help in due course. Essentially, the new structure went live from the 1st of June, albeit it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that we are still awaiting the arrival of 3 new members of staff in support from the recruitment process. What was, I think, a useful discussion point during the plan working group discussion on the 23rd of June, I explained a little bit more detail in relation to some of the contingency plans that we invoked as we went through the change, for example, in relation to the communication space and also the the translation of the police and crime plan into an implementation plan. So we carried on moving. It's the kind of bit that I would like to try and explain there. But essentially, we went live from the 1st of June. I'm extremely pleased with the high quality of some of the new arrivals as well, which I think is a really important point. And I've been very, very impressed in terms of those people literally hitting the ground running in terms of delivery of what we're trying to achieve in support of the Commissioner. So early doors for us, but my view would be that we are already being very effective in our delivery.
Brilliant. If you could keep us updated with that, of any teething issues that we know what's happened, that'd be brilliant. Okay, how will you demonstrate the benefits resulting from the restructure to residents?
Thank you very much. Good question. I think through the delivery of my police and crime plan, because ultimately that's almost my contract with the public, really. That's what they've told me they wanted. I formed the police and crime plan, having had 8,000 responses through 3 or 4 different forums from 2020 to 2021. So delivering on the public's pledges, which have now become that legal document, I think by effective oversight and scrutiny, and I feel very confident out here now that I am able to really make sure that I have a thorough, robust oversight and scrutiny plan that I'm able to share with you both at this forum and also through your subgroup into more detail if you wish to go through that. And I suppose communicating with the public. So delivering on the pledges, holding the force to account, driving down crime, and then I need to communicate that. So I think that's how I will demonstrate it.
Can I ask you what form of communication you use to residents? Because a lot of things go on social media, but not everybody has access to that.
Yes, that's a really good point. Thank you. So we are just at the moment drawing up, writing a new communication strategy. The new head of communication started on the, I think, 13th of June. Thank you, Jace. So that's one of the key first pieces of work I've asked him to do. And again, I will bring that back for you all to have a look at that in due course if you'd like to see that. So there will be a whole way that we are reaching out, particular to harder to reach communities, as you say, particularly older people that don't necessarily use social media. We use poll companies like Comres and YouGov to make sure that we're getting information out to harder reach communities and, enticing them to register up on our database. We are getting people signing up now for our Hans alerts, which we use for publishing my annual report and all those sorts of things. But I do publish an annual report each year, and that will also be covered in that and put on our website too.
Great, thank you, Tonya. If I can then go to Maurice.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. These changes are coming a year into your term of office. How can you demonstrate that this has not had a significant impact on the delivery of the police and crime plan?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. And it hasn't been easy because obviously I've been, focusing on supporting Jason and I working together very closely as the executive team to deliver a restructured office. But actually what I have done, and I'm very proud of, is get a number of things over the line, such as the name change. I made that commitment to the people of the Isle of Wight, as Ian has said, that bringing back the Race Policing Unit, I was lobbied very much by Member of Parliament for the Isle of Wight and the councillors there that they felt very strongly, and members of the public, by opening a new police police station, demonstrating my increasing visibility by setting up my ASB task force. You know, I think ASB is number 4 or 5 in my plan. I've got, you know, over 100 grand out of the door last year in terms of ASB resolutions, whether it be more CCTV cameras, commissioning charities that work with young people to divert ASB away from some of those more built-up areas. I've set up my Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force group, which I'm now chairing. The government have now told me that I've got to, all PCCs have to chair a homicide review board because it ties in with the new serious violence duty that's coming in and the new serious violence code as part of the duty. I'm also working with the upper tier councils, the 4 directors of public health across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight on the new government's 10-year drug strategy. And I am hoping that, well, we're just working it through now, that I'm going to be the SRO, the Senior Recognised Officer, on the implementation of a drug strategy covering Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So that plan has some black and white, you know, things like my unauthorised encampments meeting. That's one of my pledges in my plan. So I've been carrying on and doing lots of work, regardless of the bits that have been going on behind the scenes. My front facing, going out, regular visits to the Isle of Wight, regular visits to north, south, east, west of the county. I've attended, I think nearly every parish council meeting at one point or another over the last year, and neighbourhood watch meetings, going out with Community Speed Watch, meeting with district councils, borough councils. It's been an incredibly busy year. And when I look back over what has been done, yeah, I mean, I'm loving it, but there is still so much more to do as well. But I haven't taken my foot off the gas at all.
Thank you, Maurice. Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. Is that on? What would be the true in-year savings after these redundancy costs in this year?
So the ongoing savings, £704,000 per year.
And in this year, I mean, how much of
Sorry.
that is... So in year, what's the savings in year?
Right, so in year, so the 704,000 is the ongoing saving. The in-year saving, if you take off the net off the redundancy costs, which I'm going to defer to Andy to in a minute, are £146,000, almost like a windfall really, that we didn't expect to have in this year's budget. Does that make sense? So you've got the 704 minus off the 558, 146 is the net amount, and that is the bit that we will now realise is a bit of a windfall in this year. That wasn't included in my budget that I set in February because, of course, at that point I wasn't at the end of the restructuring legal process, so I didn't know what that number would be. So it is a windfall within this financial year. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If we could move to Margot.
Thank you, Chairman. Donna, I'm intrigued as to how this net 146, 150,000 and the 700 next year will make its way into operational budgets. I have a slight worry on that front, as with indeed all councils, you are looking at inflationary pressures across the board.
Yeah.
How are you quantifying that? And how do you intend to provide for that in the future and assess the risk, in fact?
It's such a good point, Councillor Porter. Thank you for raising it. In fact, actually, with everything that's been going on with inflation and everything else, it's one of the points that I raised with Andy and Jace about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which is a bit of a head in the hand moment, sort of, you know, we need to do. In fact, I raised this with Andy, I think back in February, around the inflation risk. We discussed the inflationary pressure that we were building into the budget when we work. Andy Lowe, as our finance director, works very closely with Richard Croucher, who you'll remember, for those of you at the budget meeting this year, the Chief Constable's finance director. So Andy and Richard work incredibly closely together. They are, in fact, both employed by Hampshire County Council as heads of finance, and are on secondment to the two respective organisations. So, of course, are colleagues and work very well together. We discussed inflation back in August, September last year. We could see that clearly inflation at that point, I think, was 2.5%, or 2 or 3%. It was growing, having had a decade of stagnant inflation, which has been very, very welcome indeed for the previous decade. But of course, it was on the rise. So we did build in an inflationary pressure. I want to say it was I think it was a 4% inflationary pressure into the budget. So we have got a bit of a buffer zone. However, none of us knew what was coming in terms of the cost of living crisis because of the price of oil. I am really pleased that oil dropped by 9.8%, I think it was on Tuesday this week, after the Chancellor had walked out of number 11, so I don't know whether it was connected to that. But nonetheless, there was a movement in some oil prices, but of course it's so, we can't base anything on that. It's so movable every day. So we are looking at some significant pressures. We did have a catch-up 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. This week it's something that I'm talking to that those that hold the money, the purse strings, you know, as you would imagine in my role. Constabulary and my budget combined, as you will remember, is £509 million. So when you have some slippage, 0.5%, 0.25%, the knock-on, it's a ripple into a tidal wave. And of course it does, they are big numbers. At the moment, we're probably looking at £1.5 million and upwards in terms of the costs of fuel and energy bills to the police estate, which, as you know, I am the landlord of, 130 buildings. And you can imagine how much fuel the force are using with vehicles out on the road 24 hours a day. So it is a big consideration. The £704,000, we start the same as you will do in your councils, our budget process in sort of back end of August, September time. So I'm working through what I want to spend money on at the moment, what I think needs to happen. The force are doing the same. They will then come to me, as they would to you if you were the cabinet in your council, to say, right, here's our budget proposals. There was me thinking, fantastic, we've got budgets going up each year, everything's looking quite good. Now it looks like we might be into some cuts rounds because of the costs, because of the inflationary pressures. I'm preempting what will come from the government. You know that we are subject to the Home Office. I say we, as in my budget comes from the Home Office. We are subject to a 3-year spending comprehensive spending. So they've given us our 3-year indication, but what they haven't given us is clearly the exact figures. On top of that, the other big sort of movable thing for me at the moment is the fact that the police officers have not had a pay rise for 3 or 4 years. And you will probably recall me saying to you that I built 3.5% pay rise into my base budget that started on the 1st of April. The police pay rise, we are hoping to have that confirmed before the summer recess. I've heard talk of it being 3%, which would be good because we'd have a bit of a windfall, which we want to look at the police South East allowance. We are the lowest in the South East at the moment. That puts us at risk of officers moving to other forces. Next door in Sussex are at 1,500. We're at 1,100 at the moment. So we are vulnerable on that front. It's something I've raised with the chief around retention of and attraction, but retention of police officers. But I've also heard that the police pay rise could be 5%. So, you know, at the moment, until we get that clarification from the Home Office, and then if it does come in being higher than we've budgeted at 3.5%, will the Home Office be then funding that in some way over a phased period of 1 or 2 years? And all of the PCCs across the country shared our data in terms of what we're putting into our budget, and 3.5% is the highest. So we are in the healthiest position. Some have budgeted 2.5%. So for them, big problems if it comes in at 3.5 or more. So I want more police officers. I really hope that £704,000 will go towards paying for more cops. That is my number one commitment to the people of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, as you know. But it may be that the inflationary pressures of fuel for the next couple of years swallow up some of that money. But when they settle down again, which I do think they will, then we will then have that windfall money back at that point to then be able to use as revenue ongoing for more police.
Thank you very much, Donna. That is reassuring. Will you be bringing a report on the inflationary pressures to the planning subgroup in the autumn? Is that a reasonable expectation?
I wasn't going to, but I will do. Absolutely. I'm very happy to. I mean, it's part of the budget process, but if you would like that, I will 100% make sure that that comes forward to your budget working group.
Chairman, I think this is useful. We have integrated the planning and the budgetary implications a lot more closely. Whether that group chooses to set a subgroup to look especially at the finances, but I think it's important that we look at the two in parallel. It is an operational risk for all councils and you.
I would agree, Margot, and I think for me there's something that we know, don't we, about the way the process works, that you guys are always really up against it as far as time, which means we're always up against it as far as time, but I think understanding some of those risks and your mitigation we can do ahead of time. To understand what you're looking at, so that we really only have to look at in that short space of time exactly what we've got to look at that's in that short space of time. I think that'd be really helpful. Thank you very much, Margot. Dave, I know you've got a question.
It follows from something the Commissioner very helpfully informed us of. This is the issue around fuel, and obviously people want police vehicles out there doing their job, But I can imagine with the increases in fuel, this has become a bit of a challenge. I was just interested, looking ahead, and it may not be your brief, and I fully understand if it's not, how the force is approaching the electrification of vehicles. Is there anything you can let us know about that? Do you know?
I do, actually. So for neighbourhoods, they have BMW I somethings, the little ones. They're like a size of a Fiesta, maybe a bit more squashed up. I'm sure BMW won't like me saying that very much. But anyway, we are working with a valued car supplier in Hampshire in the Isle of Wight. Yeah, so we have got electric vehicles for neighbourhoods. Not for all of them, but for some of them. You know, I mean, dare I say that the force perhaps might need to look at using electric scooters? I'm joking, by the way. I'm not proposing that. I know how much the public don't like electric scooters. But in all seriousness, push bikes, walking, foot patrol, you know, using electric vehicles. I'm looking at, I want to have a look at some PV panels, how we can get more PV panels on the roofs of police stations to drive down our utility bills. And actually, whatever we can do to be making the fleet greener, leaner in terms of not costing as much money, vehicles, but not being as expensive is, of course, key. The reason we can't use electric vehicles at the moment for the roads policing unit is just the sheer number of hours they're out. They'd have to be stopping and plugging in, you'll know as a former police officer. And with the armed response vehicles, the sheer weight, as you know, of what goes into the boot of those vehicles means that the drain on the battery would, again, not make them, we wouldn't be able to meet our Home Office requirements in terms of having armed response within 20 minutes at any point anywhere in the county, 24 hours a day, 356 days a year. So yeah, we as soon as battery technology, we'll be there, we'll be doing it.
Thank you. Maurice.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just related to that and the rising cost of energy. I mean, I assume that energy efficiency of the built estate is going to feature highly within the estate strategy.
Yes, it will do. And actually, it's the Councillor Power show today, but we actually we use Winchester for a number of our purchasing of energy and how we do that as well. So we have a relationship with Winchester City Council to make sure that we're buying in bulk to help drive down our costs. But yes, it's a good point, and we do need to think about that very carefully.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for that, Commissioner. I think one of the things that I'd be particularly interested in, it's not, I think, a response for today, but you've talked a lot about the word lean, and for sometimes lean's quite an interesting balancing act with resilience. And I think there's something about, therefore, sort of people dependency, single roles, et cetera, maybe when everybody's in place, perhaps it's a conversation that we can have about how you've built in a level of resilience into your team as well. So if there are no other questions on this item, we have potentially just a recommendation that we receive the update on the Commissioner's office arrangements, and it's noted, if I have that agreement from the panel. Agreed. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to item 11, which is the Commissioner's Police and Crime Plan Performance and Delivery Update, which is available on pages 27 and 34. Donna.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is probably the bit of the report today that I'm, of your meeting today, I should apologise, that I'm probably the most excited about presenting to you, because I know you've been craving this information, you've been wanting this from us for a long time, and I think that's just and quite right. And I hope now that we're going through the kind of the restructure and everything, we've been through all of that and we've got the new team on board, you're going to now start to, we can quench your thirst, we can deal with this for you in the way that is right and proper. So, as I say, Pete is with me today. I'm going to hand over to Pete to take you through the first half of this, then I'll end, and then over to you for questions, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and members for having this presentation today. So, as my title suggests, maybe that I'm part of my role within the Opcc is to support Commissioner with the implementation plan, which in its entirety will thereby deliver the police and crime plan. So my role within that is to manage, and what I'm going to present to you today is to manage various elements of that to make sure that that's delivered on time, and also the outcomes are focused and tracked in terms of the delivery. Before I go on to the first slide, what I probably would like to point out is that I'm new in post, probably about 5 weeks in, I think, at the moment. But what I have been really impressed by, and particularly in relation to the office arrangements that you've heard about in the previous slides, is about all the work that's been going on in relation to this. So what this represents is not new, necessarily new work, but it captures all the great work that's been going on within the office and the collaboration and partnerships in Hampshire Constabulary that is already in place, but it also tracks and monitors what needs to be done in the remaining term of the Commissioner. I understand that you might have seen these in your pack, so I'm just going to explain to you a broad overview about what the implementation plan contains. And then also, just into the next slide, we're going to dive into a little bit of detail in terms of an example about what one of the project areas contains, just to give you a bit more detail in relation to that. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see that right at the front end of this is the activity that's delivered through those collaborative partnerships, the commission services and the work with Hampshire Constabulary. And then all the boxes contained within the orange line there that you can see around the outside are essentially all the elements of the police and crime plan, plus a couple of others that the Commissioner's already mentioned in terms of violence against women and girls, work with trauma-informed in terms of particularly in relation to victims and victim outcomes, violent reduction unit, and also the work that goes on with the Youth Commission. So the entirety within the orange box there is just a representation of the different project areas broken down into programmes. Just to mention that programme Group 1 there, just to give you an example about how that maybe works as effectively and efficiently as possible. So Group 1 there is represented by more police, improve police visibility, and also easier 101 reporting. So hopefully it's clear that we group what we can together so that the activity and the work that sits around those in particular areas work together and in conjunction together, not in isolation. And then going through to the right-hand side there is within this, and again very much part of my role, tracking there what some of the risks may be in terms of timeline, delivery, and making some recommendations to the Commissioner as we go along through the term. We've spoken about the office arrangements already. I think my early sort of view in terms of being new to the Opcc is that there's a really good complement in the office now in terms of those experienced members of staff that have got existing skills to help deliver this implementation plan, but also the new staff as well in terms of that those areas on the right-hand side there. Overarched, of course, as you'd probably expect, by the governance that sits within the Opcc around these project areas and therefore the police and crime plan. So next I'm just going to dive into one example there, Police and Crime Plan Area 1, which is, the headline of that is 600 more police officers. So on the left-hand side there is just a screenshot of the Police and Crime Plan, Commissioner's Police and Crime Plan, 600 more officers. And I just wanted to dive into a little bit of detail here, just to give you an example of one project area that is replicated across the other project areas as well. So you'll see there, first of all, the Police and Crime Plan narrative in terms of the context of the particular area. What it will do, so throughout the whole of the Police and Crime Plan, those are broken down into project objectives. So again, we can track and focus on those and make sure that the outcomes and the outputs that we're seeking are delivered. And finally there, in relation to the outcomes, so as you see from here, these outcomes are replicated elsewhere in the Police and Crime Plan, but again, this is just an example of one project area that is replicated across the remainder of the Police and Crime Plan. And finally, before I hand on to back to the Commissioner, In relation to, I spoke about the governance that sits around this, but the working arrangements in the office is that each of these will have project owners, so dedicated people in the office that will work on each of these project areas, together with their colleagues and their team members, managed through to that governance process and then onwards to that external reporting, whether it's to this panel, the working groups, and of course the communities of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight.
Thank you very much, Pete. Could you just go back to the first of your slides with the all the project codes on them? That's the one. So that hashtag PCP 1, 2, 3 up to 17, effectively, let's take visibility. That is hashtag PCP number 2, isn't it, Pete? So yes. Every single pledge that you've got in here, the main pledges, have all been given a project code. And what Pete was just saying, just to go back then, is that what we've done is, because some of them have got more synergy with each other, so that's why there are then clusters, as Pete has said. And then what happens is then within our team, we have got amongst our senior leaders, project leads for each of those. So someone will be, it might be Jace, Pete, Meg, our head of business. People will own those projects, and it will be their responsibility to make sure that we're getting the delivery of that pledge, over the line, out the door. We can then go back to my next slides now. And then, of course, I know that we touched on this before around the when, so that you can sort of monitor how we're delivering them, when we're delivering them. So what we've done here is we've taken, because of course we can't do it all in one go, and I can't leave it all until the end either, because I want to get this stuff done by May 24 at the end of my term of office. So we've got some of these things, there's already things in this police and crime plan that I've already done and delivered on. There's some that I still need to do a bit more to get it over the line, and there's some that we haven't started quite yet working on. So there's a mixture. So we've got the ones that we're going to be delivering throughout the summer now up to the autumn of 22. So that's what we're calling our first section 1. Section 2, the midterm plan project management objective should be delivered throughout the sort of next year, throughout spring, summer and autumn of 2023. And then we've got those that will be delivered towards the end of 23, the kind of chunk 3 of the plan delivery going into the April 24, just before the election, my re-election. So that's how, and as you know, in every page, for those of you that haven't looked at it before, on every page you have your green box at the end, which is, this is how you can monitor the success and the outcome. And of course, ultimately, the success and the outcome is going to be governed by, getting feedback from consultation with the public on how happy or not they are with crime and what's going on across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. On to the next one, please, Pete, if I can. So this is about our current focus, the forthcoming activity. So looking at, for example, that sort of cluster 1, more police, tackling antisocial behaviour, preventing young people from committing crime, youth engagement, improving outcomes for victims. So what we know, for example, in terms of some of these things, some of our go early ones, is that, we are on track to achieve by the end of September 22, 100 and more we're on track to deliver our police uplift programme of 498 officers by September this year, and then the extra 102 that I pledged to get us to the 600, which, as you know, is above and beyond the government target, by March of next year. Now, I need to make sure that the force are doing that, they're keeping on track to do that. Actually, we know that there are new officers that start and then leave and don't like being a police officer, could be midway through their training. So I need to make sure that through my oversight and scrutiny, I'm working with the force, challenging them. How many people are you actually recruiting? 600 is not going to be enough, because some will leave. They're actually going for 666, I think it is, so that there is some drop off to allow for us to definitely meet that 600. And in fact, because the Met are not meeting their national uplift target, the government have asked us to, Home Office have asked us to come forward and say how many extra we can deliver on top of our targets. Then about a third of the police forces in the country have come forward, commissioners have come forward and said, yeah, we can do that. So I went to the government, to the Home Office, responded to the Home Office about 3 or 4 weeks ago to say, yep, I'm on target to do 102 more, but, and so I'd like the extra money if you're offering it. And they came forward and said, great, we're going to offer you some cash for 48 of those. Unfortunately, it's one-off money. So I can't use it as revenue. Otherwise, I'd be going and recruiting an additional 48 on top. So it's one-off money, but nonetheless, it's stuff that we can use to go towards some of the project, pressures that we have. Obviously, I'm chairing the ASB task force, and that really driving up. We're going to be rolling out the training across the county for the community trigger, so the public know their rights around failure of councils, health authorities, police forces to, if they're not dealing with ASB in the correct way, and registered social housing providers. That's the fourth one. I'm about to retender a contract for restorative justice solutions to make sure that we are really getting outcome for victims, particularly of ASB. Cross-cutting into commissioning, so really looking at sort of 8 service areas across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and really making sure that I am scrutinising Hampshire Constabulary on its child-centred approach, so making sure that I'm doing that around youth engagement and preventing young people from committing crime. What are yachts doing? How effective are they at having that child-centred approach? How effective at Hampshire Constabulary at supporting them? How effective are yachts at taking what we call PPM1s or safeguarding referral forms from the police? Are they acting on them? How quickly are they acting on them? What more could be done? These are all the sorts of things that I'm doing through my oversight and scrutiny of the public services in Hampshire. In terms of youth engagement, I've got my youth independent advisory group. I met with them this week again. Through our Youth IAG and our Youth Commission, we've launched our big conversation. This year's focus and theme is hate crime. They're also focusing on student safety, on safeguarding. We've got cyber ambassador training I'm running through the schools, and we've got our 180 campaign, which is 180 different activities that young people can access over the summer and actually throughout the year in terms of diversionary if they're bored and they might otherwise be committing ASB. I've given out just under £4 million worth of contracts and grants over the last 12 months. That's because, if you remember, I increased that by £1 million this time last year. It was previously 2.5 million. I've made it 3.5 million, but I've got some other money from the MOJ as well, which is taking it up to just under 4 million. Making sure that I'm commissioning 20 PAN, Hampshire and Isle of Wight wide services and support programmes, very much linked into VORG perpetration and in fact focusing on, I think every district policing area in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight has tackling domestic abuse as one of their top 3 priorities. And if you haven't seen your district commander's local policing priorities, get in contact with them and ask them if they can send you a copy so that you can have a look at it. So it's about tackling the crimes that matter to you the most. It's about seeing more police officers on our streets. It's about increasing police visibility. It's reducing the number of young people that are committing crime through prevention and early intervention, something I'm very, very focused on, not criminalising children, but giving them the support they need to stop them from being exploited and being, criminals. Very often with children, it is not a victimless crime. They are both victims and perpetrators all in one, and it's often very complicated and actually quite sad. Really committed to delivering, as I said to you before, that more visible and accessible policing service to children and young people, to make sure that we are reducing crime and harm across both of the counties, driving up victim satisfaction by my communication, all the different methods of the way that we do that, standing up for victims of crime. Of course, I'm national lead for victims of crime, so that is very much my national and my local focus, and the two interface very well. Reducing violence against women and girls, and making sure that there is an increase in confidence in policing, which is something which is incredibly challenging at the moment, but that's what the outcome should be. And from my perspective is making sure that I'm being open and communicative with you and giving you everything that you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. We will go to questions. I think just to sort of reflect on something that's been incredibly useful, and it's also about a level of visibility that I'm trying to establish with the panel, but also with members of the public. Under each of, because you're running a program project management system, under each of those, so say Police and Crime Plan, #1, the working plan group previously would have had quite a lot of visibility of what could be described as, for that project, quite a lot of description. So what the scope was, what the objectives were, what the timescales were, how it would be evaluated, when it was expected to finish. We saw that, and that was discussed at the plan working group. So there's a question about how much visibility the panel will see for the next layer down, but also I think I'm right in saying the office used to publish that information on the website, so it was also visible to a certain level for members of the public. So I don't know what your plan is for the future as far as the next level down.
Thank you, Chair. Very useful. I mean, yeah, it's always really difficult for us to know quite how to pitch it at the main panel because, of course, what I don't think you want is a duplication of the two. And, of course, your subgroup, we did go into more detail with the 4 or 5 of you that were at the subgroup because we thought that that's what was expected of us. I think we'll be guided by you in terms of if you want us to bring, you know, dates, times. You talked about budgets previously, Councillor Power, as well. So a lot of these things are about manpower time, but there are things that do have a budget associated, or they will have a budget associated to them. So, for example, improving the 101 service, there will be things amongst that. Now, there is already money that I've allocated in this year's budget, £1.5 million, that went to Hampshire Constabulary because they needed to employ some more IT architects to interface 40-odd systems through the CMP system. So it is part of my police and crime plan delivery to make the 101 service and just reporting crime generally easier, a more pleasant process because people don't like it. But in terms of that app, for example, you know, I've talked about that. Right, so let's just take that as a simple example. If there was, for example, £50,000, £80,000, whatever it might be that's allocated to that, what I envisage through the subgroup, and again, be very much led here by what you want from us, is that Pete would come along with Jace and say, right, okay, hashtag PCP3 101 service, time delivery is this, you know, this is where we're on track, give you an update at each meeting, you can have the information in advance, you can read it and scrutinise it and ask the right questions when we come to the meeting. We can give you an update on the cost of how, if it's on budget, under budget, over budget, when the project comes to an end, if there is any savings. So, but a lot of the things that are going on in here, like the ASB stuff, yes, I've got a budget of £200,000 a year on that, which I can report back to you on that one. So we will give you that information through the subgroups if that's acceptable.
Brilliant. I'm sure that'd be a very useful conversation to have as far as what level of detail and where. I'm conscious of a question from Narinda.
Thank you, Chair. Just building upon that point, Donna, I think after we met with yourself and your team, I think we know that going forward we will get the information as a panel that we require to effectively scrutinise the police and crime plan. But we ultimately actually represent members of the public. And I know at that meeting we talked about transparency and something that you really want as well. So I would like progress made, and I think Jace said he was going to go away and look at this. But members of the public see your easy to read police and crime plan on the website. I think they would benefit from an easy to read version of the implementation plan. So alongside that, even if it's rag rated to say you are making progress, I mean, in your report, you just reeled off loads of things that you're doing, in effect to deliver that appropriately. But I do think that members of the public would actually appreciate and benefit from a very easy to read version of that.
I think that's a really good point, actually, and I think it's something we can take away. Perhaps have a section on our website we can build for that, so we can be demonstrating, putting ticks next to the, if something's delivered, done, when the date it was done, etc. And also that it will get built into our annual report anyway, but that's not everyone's going to read that. So I think that's a takeaway for us to definitely go away and look at. Thank you.
I think Dave might have a useful point at this stage as well.
Yeah, it probably builds on your point. I was sitting here thinking this is very comprehensive. There's an awful lot of stuff going on. But I then fell onto my kind of evaluation hat, which said, and it really came back to a point you commented on, you know, confidence in policing. Do people, this is a question I asked myself, do people feel safer and well served? And if they do, why? What is it? So it's about this qualitative point that, and I think Narinda's made a good point, you can get a lot of facts which are up there, but to the member of the public, I'd love them to, you know, walk down to Bitton after the police station's been in action and say, do you know, this is a great place now, it's really safe, we've got this. So it's capturing that qualitative analysis, I think would be good, as well as being able to prove that, you know, I don't know, you've put 102 police officers on the street, yeah, what was the effect of that? How you evaluate it, and do the people that have had those people on the street, wherever they are, do they feel safer? Because that's what it's all about. So I know it's a bit of a conflict with detail, and I'm on the detail squad are probably onto me now, but I think evaluation is really important, because actually you're doing an awful lot of good work. It's quite clear. But it needs to be, the outcome needs to be measurable, and I totally agree with you. it needs to be simple, doesn't it, really? That's just an observation more than a question, but very good, though.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Chair, if I may, just for 30 seconds. I know you've got a lot of questions to get through. Actually, yeah, and the force do an awful lot of that victims and public confidence testing in the constant surveying they are doing, and they have to feed that back to the Home Office. So there's no reason why I couldn't use some of that Hampshire Constabulary data, put it on my website as well. Ours is much more victim focused. How happy do victims feel? Because my focus is standing up for victims. The Chief Constable's focus is obviously how safe do the public feel, and my job is to hold her to account to make sure that she's testing that the public do feel safer and then publishing that data. So it's all a bit slightly conflated, but it's a great point, and I think we need to build it in.
And I can close with my question, because I have one listed, by saying that sometimes we should put questions to you, but not expect you to answer it here and now, so that we get the answer between meetings. We don't have that many meetings, but it'd be nice to have the answer so that at the next meeting we can say, right, well, we asked that. Actually, this is the answer we were given, which you've considered, and then we follow off with that, rather than, I know it's tempting to put you on the spot all the time, but actually some of these things need a bit of thought, and I mean, the work that Pete's done, for example, there's a lot gone on there, and he probably would prefer to take that away, have a think about it, and say, right, I can answer that in this way. And as long as we can get that back before the next meeting, we can be informed, because we keep in touch.
And if Caroline captures any of those things for us, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dave. We're going to go to Margot.
Thank you, Donna. And I am very relieved that you are making an investment in easier reporting. And that, I think, serves as an example. Because I looked at this plan and said, oh, no improvements until 2024, I'm fed up with this. But if I can say to people locally, an investment has been made, have you perceived that difference? And that's the qualitative assessment of what you are doing, which we are more than happy to work with you on. My question's about baseline data, and this comes back to the accessibility of the performance criteria that we're working to. I would very much like to see the baseline data for each of those deliverables that you have in your plan, so that the public can look at that and say, yes, I understand this cannot be achieved for a couple of years because of higher priorities, but I want to know that you are going to be measuring something that is meaningful to me. And I think I'm really asking when we're going to get that baseline data against that deliverables. I don't want great complex brouhaha, but something that is meaningful to the person on the street.
I think that's probably one for the subgroup, if that's okay, because I think we need to go into some detail on that one of how we're going to do that. So if that's all right with you. But thank you for your comments.
But I think it's very important, and it comes back to this visibility that we are doing our job and striking the right balance, Chairman, as to what is seen in the public domain and what is seen in the subgroups. We really need to concentrate on that to justify our existence, Chairman. I do have one ancillary, Chairman, if that's okay. I have heard that some new officers are struggling with the degree work, and that some forces have been allowed to remove that from their recruitment and their new officers. Is that going to be an impact on our new staff? And what elbow room do we have to work our way around that one, I think is the best way of putting it. Thank you, Chairman.
Very good point. So first of all, there has been a degree of flexibility if you were a non-compliant Chief Constable. So the Home Office stated 3 years ago that they wanted all police officers to be doing the police entry degree, the police PEQF, within a set period of time. And our Chief Constable adopted that, as you know, two and a half years ago. For the police officers that started first intake on PEQF was March 2020. Some Chief Constables said, ridiculous, don't like it. I think there were 3 or 4 of them in the country that said, that's not the way you should train new police officers. That's not going to drive the skill set that we need for police officers in Britain in 2020, whatever the year was, 2020, 2021. And they still aren't using PEQF. The Home Office reviewed this, and the previous policing minister, the recently retired policing minister, Kit Malthouse, wrote to all police forces, PCCs and Chief Constables about 3 or 4 weeks ago to say, you must all be on PEQF by set date at some point next year. I think it's April or May of 2023. Having said that, the government is in a state of flux at the moment. So it might be that a new policing minister will review that. Tom Pursglove is the new policing minister. He may well review that and decide that that's not a position he wants to stick with. It's certainly a conversation I'll be having with him when I do catch up with him next week. And in terms of those police forces that are struggling to meet their uplift numbers have just been given a bit of flexibility. So Thames Valley, our buddied police force, have done PEQF, as we have for the last 2 and a bit years. Because they are a little bit behind their uplift numbers, their chief constable took a decision in consultation with their PCC last month to put out a statement to say that they are now moving to a hybrid model where, when you join, you can choose. Do you want to do the core base original police officer training, or do you want to do the PEQF? And they've been allowed to do that. The Home Office have not sort of kicked off about that one because it's a way to aid recruitment. So your second part of your question was, is this going to have could this have an effect on us? Well, yeah, actually, because there are police officers that really, probationers, as we call them, that really want to be police officers, but they don't want to do the degree. So do I think that if you lived in the middle of the north of the county and you could perhaps travel over to southern Thames Valley, Berkshire, do I think that you might be tempted to do that? Well, yeah, probably, if you really want to be a police officer but you don't want to do the degree, and that is your main cause for wanting to no longer be a police officer in Hampshire. I think it's a really small risk, I have to be honest. We're a really well-rated force and people like working here, and actually we are the net beneficiaries of people transferring from other forces, particularly the Met, to us. We are very much, it comes our way and not the other way. So it is a risk, but I think it's a small one.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I could go to Dave McKinney.
Thanks, Chairman. It's just about this performance data, and I know we've had quite a lot of discussion around it, but we're still not getting the data. So when do you think we will start to actually receive the data, the commentary around the data? So at the moment, you give us very high-level information, then you give us a verbal update, which is great, but as you know, you talk very fast, and of course, what it doesn't allow us to do is actually to scrutinise anything you're saying in the public domain. So if we get the commentary early, before our meetings, that allows us to review it and then actually have a much more constructive, open meeting where we can actually ask you specific questions around the commentary. And obviously now that you've got Pete in post, I'm hoping that's going to be fairly soon. But for me, when will we start to get the information on the data? And also, we've heard some risks today, but of course that's not being given up to us in advance. It's just as a result of us asking you questions. So again, if there are any risks, then obviously we'd expect those to be coming to us at a much earlier stage.
Are you talking about force performance data?
I'm talking about your plan. So,
sorry, beg your pardon. Okay. Yeah. That will be built into the subgroup, and that will all be part of the base information that Margot's referring to in terms of, project timeline, project owner, implementation, are we on target for the deadline for that particular project? All of that will come in. So in terms of the performance of how that project is going, you'll get all of that.
Okay, thank you. And will you also build into that any risks? So if you're starting to identify risks at the very earliest opportunity, I think that should also come to the panel as well, so we can actually understand what the risks are and actually what you're doing about it to alleviate it.
Yeah, we're using a very well-used project management platform for this, and they'll all be RAG rated as red, amber and green. So yes, you'll also get the RAG rating of all of those. So if something is slipping, you'll get the why, what we think the mitigation is, what that knock-on effect that has on other projects. You'll get all of that as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. If I can now go to Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. Visibility is one of your key commitments through the Police and Crime Plan. However, if you use the Constabulary's website to find your local neighbourhood policing teams, their contact information is missing. And in fact, you alluded to actually, if you want to know your local policing plan, to contact your local district commander. May I respectfully say that actually that should be public knowledge? You shouldn't have to be looking for that. Are you holding the Chief Constable to account for providing clear and accessible information on the Constabulary's website? So what I'm saying is if any resident can't find out who their neighbourhood policing officer is. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Liz. It's a good point, actually, a really good point. My comment to you as elected people in your own right was around holding. That's what you're there to do on behalf of the public that you are elected to represent, whether you're a district or borough councillor or a unitary or a county councillor. So that's why I was, saying that in your privileged position, which we all are as elected individuals, you should be contacting your district commander, and I would expect you to have access and be able to get hold of your district commander as an elected representative. And I think on behalf of the tens of thousands of people that you represent, it's only right and proper that you have a look at your district commander's policing plan to make sure they're doing what they need to do for your members of the public you represent. So it was kind of a helpful suggestion really by me. In terms of the accessibility to the police, I think they're very much trying to, push people to the online, appreciating that not everyone uses social media, and particularly older people, which is why the 101 service we know is in as much demand now as it ever has been. And so the police, they don't really want people going through, you individually, I've just directed you to your district commanders because of your privileged position, but actually for the general members of the public, they don't want them going through the individual, they want them going through the centralised system, which is on the Constabulary's website. So they're published, yes, you're right. My job is to hold the Chief Constable to account to make sure that the public can easily get hold of contact detail and information. I guess the one way the Chief Constable could improve that would be by having more front desks, because the people that are disabled, that don't read, that are very dyslexic, that don't like using the telephone because perhaps they're autistic, they don't want to speak on a telephone, they want to speak to a human being, actually front desks really help with that. And that is, of course, something through, well, we're going to go on to the estates. I won't talk about front desks now because I think we'll get there on that one. But, it's a really good point around accessibility. And yes, I do make sure that they are doing, I am a bit concerned that they're trying to do everything online, and actually it doesn't work for a number of people. I have pushed back on that point. And the 101 system and the online reporting is not for everybody, and I've made it quite clear to the force that, and it's not their fault, it's Home Office, that the online, that front landing page is just awful. But there's good news, green shoots. I know I mentioned this before, the Home Office are about to allow individual forces to manipulate their own landing page, so let's wait for that to happen.
Sorry, that's my apology then, because I thought you were saying that residents should actually contact the district commanders. That's me misunderstanding you. May I ask a second question? Better outcomes for victims. Recent criticism has been levied against the wider police family in regard to inadequate investigations of violence and abuse where the reported perpetrator is a member of police staff or a police officer, albeit on another member of staff. Are you confident the Chief Constable is ensuring integrity of investigation of such reported crimes and support for the victims of those crimes? Thank you.
That is an excellent question and very timely, actually. And I think the police have gone on a significant, painful, self-reflected journey over the last year, particularly post Sarah Everard and a couple of the very other untoward incidents that have happened in the Met. And actually it's not, whilst the worst and the highest profile have been in the Met, actually there are incidents in every force, as we know. And it is sad and not where we want our police service to be. And there are retired police officers in this room, I know today, who will feel as aggrieved as any members of, like me as a member of the public do, about the untoward behaviours that come out of people who are the ones that we look up to keep us all safe in our communities. I don't know if any of you have heard of the super complaint, the police super complaint situation that's just happened, but there has been a report carried out by and I want to say it's the Centre for Women's Rights. It's a big national organisation. And they looked at what happens to victims of particularly domestic abuse and sexual abuse when their partner is a police officer. And this is not exclusively for women. This could be male on male. It could be a female officer with a male boyfriend, husband, who's the victim. But they have looked at the number of police complaints and investigations over the years and how the victim felt by picking up the phone or reaching out to that police force, knowing that that perpetrator of that crime was an employee of that police force, and perhaps would be a colleague of that particular perpetrator. Let's say, you live in Petersfield, and it could be a local Petersfield officer that works with that person that could well be involved in the initial response when you're reporting that crime. And it has meant that there is some significant work that's gone on. And in fact, on Monday this week, I put out a response, a national response, a statement in, it's very, very timely, your question. So it's all in the press. Please Google police super complaints and you'll get the information about this. Or I'm happy to share information with the panel if you wish. So there has been a big piece of work done. The report went to the government. The government have considered it through the Home Office, and a number of recommendations have now been made, and chief constables have to respond in a certain way. The victim has to be notified of the SIO, the Senior Investigating Officer in the crime. That person will be somebody who is completely detached from and does not have a connection to the officer in question. There is a support package then that gets put around that individual victim of crime to ensure that there is no fear of retribution or any kind of bias that may be given towards a male or female police officer who is an alleged perpetrator of crime.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to go back to Leslie's first point, because I think you're conflating two issues. We started talking about visibility, and that went into accessibility. My question, and it's something I'd like you to consider with the Chief Constable, is around having no information about a neighbourhood policing team. Looks like there is no neighbourhood policing team, which is very different from being able to access and who you report and who you talk to. So I just wouldn't want us to conflate visibility with accessibility, and who I talk to and how I report things. It's different from knowing that there is a neighbourhood policing team, visibility of that and who they are.
Can I add to that? So I looked online at, say, North Yorkshire Police yesterday, and obviously you've got your website and it feeds into Police UK, and on there they've got their PCSOs, their sergeants, who their neighbourhood team are. So, I mean, I imagine it's a back office function, but I think, you know, I think it's certainly, when we go into ours, it's who's your local police, no information available. What's your local priorities, no information available. When's your next meeting, no information available. And I do understand and I agree that it has to be communication for everyone, but a lot of our, especially our younger people, are very much IT, and there is no information available. And yes, sorry to be a pain.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Maurice.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Donna, I'm delighted to see your emphasis on early intervention. It's something that I certainly believe in. It's often the most cost-effective way as well, particularly in areas like mental health and youth. But in particular on youth, I'm very pleased to see the efforts and the focus that you are making on young people there. How much would you say your efforts are hindered within Hampshire, particularly in trying to reach the difficult to reach youngsters by the absence of a county-wide youth service?
It would be a lot easier if there was, yes, a county-wide youth service. Having said that, in defence, I suppose, of the county council, you know, Hampshire Constabulary obviously work incredibly closely with them. Councillor Ros Chad, who, as you know, is the county council cabinet member for Children and Young People Services, she and I have had a couple of meetings, particularly factoring in the Directors of Public Health and the work that they are doing on behalf of the county, and also working very closely with my teams, working with probation services, working with the yachts. There is actually an awful lot of join-up that goes on behind the scenes. Obviously, a county youth service would be great for diversion, and I suppose what's then happened over the years is that, you know, people like myself are now backfilling the lack of that with interventions, youth projects and things like that. I mean, there's some cracking things that we're commissioning on the Isle of Wight, for example, in terms of the allotment programme that you'll know about, and, you know, there's some really good things. But yeah, I mean, the more that we can get into diversionary, the better. I think for me, though, at the moment, if I had a never-ending porridge pot of money that I could spend, it would be on mental health in teenagers, because some of the practices and things that young people now think are normal are truly frightening. The fact that the government have had to bring in a non-fatal strangulation during sexual activity tells you that is not people that are our ages and above that are predominantly doing that. This is young people who are watching and have access to some quite damaging free porn within 3 clicks on a smartphone or some kind of device, and it's being so normalised that we've now had to bring in through our parliament in the UK a law that prohibits non-fatal strangulation. You know, so there are the mental health the access to social media influences is certainly having a significant impact on driving up crime and harm, even if crimes aren't reported. There's a lot of harm that's going on out there. But it's why, and it's something Pete touched on with the, in those hashtag PCP123, whatever, that at the end of that big box, you had a couple of 2 or 3 other sort of anomalies that are also things I'm working on that are so relevant that I want you all to be aware of them, scrutinise me, look at the delivery. And that is around the trauma-informed practice. So for me, coming into this role just over a year ago, thinking, right, we really need to work with teenagers. I've said this to panel members before, but I'll repeat it in 20, 30 seconds. I then realised that we have to wind it right the way back, because trying to prevent crimes and harm in teenagers when they're already psychologically quite disturbed because perhaps they've been living in a house of domestic abuse since they were a baby, since they were born, working with particularly young mothers on the harm in pregnancy of being in an abusive, shouting, babies can hear that in the womb, and it drives up their adrenaline hormone in them when they are in the womb, and then they get addicted to adrenaline from pre-birth, and then their brains develop in a different way, and then they're much more likely to then have other conditions of the brain in terms of the development, in terms of ADD, ADHD. There's a whole load of other things that people that specialise in this thing believe that to be the case. That's why on the 1st of March this year, I held a trauma-informed conference, because I secured £460,000 from the Home Office in September last year, which means we've trained up 2,000 public sector workers, GPs, health visitors, doctors, midwives, to be aware of tackling ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, because rather than us spending a whole lot of cash we've got some young people in this county right now who are 15 and 16. They are some of the most, when I say prolific criminals in Hampshire, what I mean is the ones that are using up the most time, police time and resource. So they're not necessarily raping and murdering and the worst types of crimes, but what they are doing is carrying knives, robbing, stealing cars, threatening other people, holding knives to people's throats, taking drugs, selling drugs, the exploitation, the criminality, the amount of police time. Now, we try and wrap support services around these 15-year-olds. How about stopping them from becoming angry 15-year-olds so they don't start taking marijuana to sort of get stoned to numb the pain and then carry a knife to protect themselves because they're now selling drugs to pay for their own daily 50, 60 quid marijuana addiction. So actually, if we wind it right the way back, in supporting those families before the baby's even born, then actually what we need to be doing is to be educating and supporting families. The Troubled Families Programme, effectively, that's where there should be a lot of money, time, energy and focus. That's not entirely my job, but there's a small part of that plays into it, and that's why I'm weaving trauma-informed practice into everything I'm commissioning through the Opcc.
Thank you, Donna. I'm not sure you're going to get anybody disagreeing with you as far as early prevention on this panel. Thank you very much. I don't have any more... Oh, Tony.
Hi, Donna. Listening to what you were saying, something that's been bothering me for a long time, and my residents, in actual fact, talk about the 101 number, which it does need improving, no one will argue that. But my concern is that we've come to a point where I represent, where people will not bother to report crime because of the 101. But the real truth is there's no central point on Basingstoke, in Basingstoke, where people can go along and talk to someone, unless they can pick up someone patrolling or something like that. There's no central point. Should we not be looking, or should you not be looking, or the police looking at, localising rather than centralising? Because that, to me, is where things, in my view, go wrong. You phone the 101 number, you talk to someone on the other end. It's not their fault if they don't know Basingstoke. I've got a problem with my road, where is it, blah, blah, blah. Usually people are panicking if it's a nasty crime. And then you've got the other end where you've got people that just want to report a crime, and that, by the time, I think we've been through it, by the time we get through it, they think, well, what was the point of that? And I do wonder whether we should be looking at areas rather than centralising.
I think it's an excellent point, and it ties on to the point that Leslie made around, was it North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, whichever police force it was you looked up online. I don't know that individual police force, but what I can almost guarantee, because they've got their localised policing team contact data on that Police UK, is that they will have a very different command structure to us. They will have what we call a traditional policing command structure, and that's one where your district commander has complete flex over investigations, neighbourhood policing teams, response and patrol, and a little bit of specialist services within their police station. They have their own front desk, and they can flex as they need to respond to the crimes of the day, week, month in their patch. We don't have that here. Our command structure changed a few years ago, and it's a much more centralised, which of course goes back to the point you're just making. Yeah, I mean, you know, the future of Hampshire Constabulary and its command structure is something that's very much on my radar. I've spoken to several of you offline about this as well. You know, it was changed a few years ago because of austerity and to save money. Okay, inflationary pressures are now scuppering some of that, but this time last year I was thinking fantastic. I've got an indication from the Home Office, our formula grant for me that comes to me on behalf of Hampshire Constabulary from the Home Office is going up this year. It went up last year. It's going to go up next year and the year after. That's the indication I've got of the 3-year spending review. Now inflation is scuppering some of that. I hope the government adjusts to take that into consideration so we do have a real-time increase. But yes, it is a conversation the Chief and I have discussed. If money was no object, I would 100% have that command structure where, you know, Fareham and Gosport, Jace used to be the district commander in Fareham and Gosport, where he had all of his own tools, as I've just explained. So if there's an issue that's going off one in part of the borough, he can decamp and move everyone that he needs to there as an operational senior police officer. That would then mean you would know who your local PCSOs are much easier. You'd have that contact information. Hampshire is not in that position. A lot of the police forces aren't now because of the austerity and because of the change in command structures. I think all I can say to you on that one, Tony, is let's wait and see what happens in the future. It's obviously very much a decision for the Chief and not me, but it is very much my job to be obviously challenging and asking and holding to account.
Thank you. Can I just come back quickly, just make a comment really, but what is the cost? You know, we know the cost, the so-called savings for having it centralised, but do we know the cost that what it was by making it centralised, where crime isn't being reported, damage isn't being dealt with in the right way, you know, vandalism, things like that. And I do wonder whether we only look at the top line, we don't look at the bottom. But I'm glad you are going to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And last question on this item from Tonya.
Just because we have this every meeting and have done for I don't know how long, but we keep going on about more police. It's not what we're seeing actually in our patches. And I just want to try and get to the figures. You're saying 600 more police, but it isn't, because there's those that are retiring, they're moving out of the area, they're going to different forces, whatever. How many, what is the difference on what we had and what we've got? Because I know, you know, it's a bit that's been said before, we knew who our PCSOs were, we knew who our local police were, we had surgeries in supermarkets, you know, you could phone and get hold of somebody, email and get hold of somebody, and it just seems that service is going down, and it's, you know, we're all here to be supporting you and scrutinising you, and it's getting more and more difficult to try and support when it's not what we're seeing. We're being told something here, and it's not what we're seeing on the streets, and it's not what we're being told by the few police officers that we've got left in our patch.
Well, first of all, it's not my job to do that. It's not my. I'm not the chief constable, so it's not my job to decide if we have police officers. Obviously, in supermarkets, that is a decision. It's an operational policing decision for the chief. My job is to hold her to account. They do have surgeries in supermarkets. They are doing those in community centres. They're now doing barn meetings. Please follow multiple, not just the one in your own borough. Please follow multiple police Facebook pages and Twitter accounts, because you will see the amount of community outreach they are doing. The problem is that the numbers are not high enough, and the 600 is an actual net increase. There will be an additional 600 in Hampshire Constabulary than there were in January 2023 by March 2000. From January 2020 to March 2023. So in actual fact, Hampshire Constabulary will be recruiting 790 odd officers to backfill for the retirees and those that leave. So they already had an ongoing recruitment programme to backfill the leavers, but now they are also have a second programme to their recruitment process, which is to then uplift the 600. And as I explained to you earlier, to achieve the 600, they're actually going to 666, I think it is, because they are reflecting the fact that there will be a proportionate dropout rate for every intake. take. So the first of the police officers that joined as part of the new Uplift were in March. The pledge started in January 2020 after the general election. The first officers then started in March 2020, so they've just graduated, the 2-year probationers. So they are no longer a drain on their local neighbourhood policing teams during their supervision period in the 2 years. They are now a genuine 100% uplift in resource to police. And actually, the feedback I'm getting is that it's good. You know, local policing teams, response and patrol, and neighbourhoods, which is where they've gone to, these new officers. 498 of them will be on the roll, on the books, being paid by September of this year, and the 600 will be next year. But that is genuinely an additional brand new 600, and there is actually 790 odd that are brand new, but some of those are backfilling to match the head count. To answer your point. So there are genuinely more officers. Where do I think we need to be to get back to that feel that I can sense that you're going, you know, people wanting to know who the local PCSO is, seeing them walking around the village, the local high street, wherever it is you live. I think we probably need to be nearer 1,000 for our current population and our current demographic mix in terms of urban versus rural, and also the complexity of crime, serious organised crime, local neighbourhood crimes, traffic offences, the whole melee of everything. I think we probably need to be at 1,000. So 600 is good. It's certainly better than 498, which is what the government are funding, that I've put that commitment to, but I do think it needs to continue. So my commitment to the members of the public in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight is that I will continue to find every penny that I can to put towards more police, because that's the best way to drive down crime and keep everyone safe.
Thank you very much, Donna. If we can move on then, thank you very much for that item. We can move on to item 12, which is the estate strategy, which members will find on pages 35 and 38. Is that over to you, Commissioner, or one of your colleagues?
No, yeah, I'm going to do this one with Jace probably supporting me a little bit as well, but this is one from me. So obviously a report in front of you. We've touched on a number of the issues over the last 12 months that came out of the estates. You'll know that this time last year, when I became Commissioner, very quickly, I had uncovered some issues, and then I set about rectifying those very quickly. We work with Hampshire County Council very closely to deliver facilities management across Hampshire County, across the Hampshire Constabulary Police Estate, including the Isle of Wight as well. And of course, the big piece of work for me that we're now having to factor in is the Uplift programme. So 600 additional people means that we have to have more desks, more lockers, more taser stores, more taser charging points, more police cars. So of course, we need our estate. And when I came into this position last year, we had 5 police stations that were had already been subject for sale. I've ended the sale of one of those, and I sort of pausing on another one, but certainly, you know, making sure that we are not offloading assets that perhaps we might think in a couple of years' time, why did we do that? And it comes back to a point that was alluded to earlier about visibility, front desks, that actually that is something that, you know, I would love us to be in a position where we have more front desks. We have done a bit of a mapping exercise. We've looked at a map of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We've looked at where there are gaps, where, for example, I think I've used this one before, but it's a good one, that in Alton, if you need to sign on, you know, court bail, police bail, once a week, 3 times a week, whatever it might be, if you don't have a card because you're a prolific shoplifter, you're perhaps a heroin addict, you need to get 3 or 4 buses to get to either Havant, front desk, or Basingstoke, because they are your 2 closest, and that probably would take you a day in buses to get there and back to sign on for 2 minutes. So that's just, we're setting people up to fail, aren't we, if we do that? So working with Hampshire Fire and Rescue, looking at all of the retained fire stations, there's one in the centre of Alton, where I've had conversations with the head of estates at the fire brigade and my head of estates, Mike Ottaway, who reports into Jace, where we are looking at where we can use retained fire stations to have police front desks as well. So it's, yes, it's an ongoing. I'm currently working with East Hampshire District Council, you know, on Petersfield, looking for sites in Petersfield. There's site visits going on next week, and that there is lots of work going on here, Chair. But essentially, a report before you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Donna. I do have some people down for questions, and I'm going to start now with Narinda.
Just a quick question from me. Does any of the work contained within the estate strategy have any effect on operational policing?
Enormous amounts. is the answer to that one. So in the report, it refers to Southampton PIC, and that's probably the biggest, most significant project that's going on in the estates world for the next 12 months. The police station there in Southampton was built under the police authority days, actually, so pre-commissioners. And there are a number of issues with pipe work, heating, fresh air, cooling. We need to detach custody from the main building in terms of it needs to have an independent energy heating and air supply, so that if the building ever went into energy failure, custody is critical. All of our critical buildings across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, which custody are obviously, so Basingstoke, Portsmouth, Southampton and Newport on the Isle of Wight, those custody suites are absolutely key. They can never fail. If they do, we need to have alternative provision in place, generators and those sorts of things. At the moment, that's not the case in Southampton, so that's one of the things we're having to address amongst other, upgrading. The building's 11 years old, but I think from a health check, if it was having a health check from a property GP, you would probably say it was aged about 40, and we need to make it a bit healthier. And so to do that, it would cost a lot more money if we did it floor by floor by floor and moved everyone around and decamped some teams out. It's much cheaper to do it in one go. And to have a lot of the intelligent, the brains of the building behind the walls that we don't see in the ceilings, to have that done in one go. So we are decamping the Southampton PIC to various locations around Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, including custody. Custody will then get done first with as I've just explained to you, which means it should be closed for about 3 months. This is due to start in the spring of next year. It may end up slipping to about May time. And then custody can move back to Southampton. So we're using other custody suites that we still own in police stations around Hampshire to meet that custody demand. There are 36 cells in Southampton, so of course that's the capacity that we are finding alternative provision for. My office in Winchester, St George's Chambers, as you will know, it's not owned by me, it's a lease. We've served the notice period, I think there's just under 18 months remaining, so that will become swing space for Southampton, so we will move a team in there so that we are making sure we're not wasting public money, but also utilising every bit of space that we've got so that we can get on and do the work in Southampton. So yes, it does, it's an enormous piece of work, and the constabulary have a mini team that deal with these kind of continuity plans with my estates team so that they can be telling us what they need operationally. We need these cells, we need these parking spaces, we need these taser stores, we need, they tell us all that so that when Southampton is decamped, so yeah, what goes on in the estates plan has an enormous impact. We have to do it as a joint team with the police.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to go to Matt for a question.
Thank you. It's really good to come off the back of that. I'm very much aware of what's going on there and some of the discussions you're having with us about possible sites and things like that. So look forward to hopefully seeing those progress well. Within the strategy, can we have some more detail? I mean, are there any new properties that you're looking at? Can we have some details around some of that maybe brought forward within that? Just so that we can look into some of that detail, I think, a bit more. That's one part of my question, and then the second one I'll leave for a sec.
The answer to that is yes, Chair, and through Caroline, if she could capture that one, let us know, we can bring that back. If you let us know if you wanted to come here or to a subgroup, then we can make sure that we're giving you that level, unless you want me to give you a brief overview now, but if not, we can do it at a subgroup. It's really, your hands really. But in terms of new buildings, actually, Petersfield is certainly one. Other than that, rationalisation with the fire brigade. We've got Redbridge in Southampton, which the new joint fire and police station, gone through planning or they're into project delivery now. Cosham is the same. Brand new, shiny new blue light hub due for Cosham in terms of police and fire station on the Cosham roundabout just south of QA Hospital. Really hoping the council are going to get on with exchanging contracts and doing the land swap from PCMI to Cosham Fire Station with Portsmouth City Council. That's dragged its heels a bit at the moment on the council's part, but very hopeful that fire station doesn't slip any further, because we really need a new police and fire station blue light hub in Cosham as well. They are the ones that are in train. Isle of Wight, we've secured £75,000 under the One Public Estate funding. I think those of you that have been on the panel for a while may remember me saying this. We are in talks with the Ministry of Justice for a piece of land just next to Albany Prison, next to Parkhurst and Albany, just in front of Albany actually, for a potential blue light hub with the fire brigade, and obviously the hospital being just over the road, so it could be an overflow for ambulances as well. So yeah, lots going on. Happy to give more detail, perhaps in a subcommittee if that works for you.
I think we'd all probably appreciate that, I think, as a subcommittee piece of work.
I just wonder if I could summarise it, because I get a sense of that, Donna, from this meeting and previous meetings, and I just really want to sort of clarify it, because I think our ability to have sight of what the estate strategy is, what the improvement plan is, what that means for upgrading or new properties, what that means for how that relates to your capital programme, it's essential that we see that. And perhaps what we can do is ensure that perhaps it goes to the first policy and performance working group, because then we can decide actually how do we carry that forwards.
Yeah, we've got some work going on here. In reality, to give you a full and comprehensive written up, document, I think it's probably going to take me until Christmas to give you that, because we've got someone working with us on that right now, and I need to reflect on that, factoring in annual leave, coming back, getting that stuff signed off, so we can come to your next subgroup to give you some more detailed information than the kind of canter through I've just given you, but in terms of giving you something that's a bit more substantial, I think that's probably going to take me until the meeting after that, if that's okay. So not the next panel, but the panel after that.
What I want to explore is whether we need substantial,
okay,
or whether we need headlines as far as number of new builds, where are they, what the maintenance programme is that significant, is that light maintenance, etc., etc. I think us having that visibility sooner rather than later is probably my view about where the panel, but I'm looking for some direction from my panel members as well, and I can see lots of nods, and then I go to Tonya and then Margaret.
Yeah, I think it is worth taking to a subgroup, but because we're all transparent in a team, we all need to have it. So whether it goes to a scrutiny and then comes back to us with the headlines, but I think we all need to see that so we can feed it to our residents as well.
But absolutely, this view about headlines don't necessarily need the substantial detail, Margot.
And I would say, Donna, as well, you need our support as local planning authorities to make this happen in some cases. And again, early visibility, to know what's coming, to know how we can support you, hopefully, I think is key to successful delivery. Thank you.
Yeah, and just if you don't mind, Chair, I know it doesn't warrant necessarily a reply, it was more of a comment, but yeah, I mean, I'm working very closely. I've had 3 meetings already with New Forest District Council about Hythe Police Station and ongoing talks with the leader of the council there, and these things are happening continuously behind the scenes, as you would expect.
Brilliant. And that's why I just go to, do you know what, I don't want you to think, oh, actually what there needs lots of detail, and that delays a conversation, having high levels so that we can have that conversation and work out what the detail may or may not be in the future might be more effective. Brilliant. Sorry, Tony, go on.
Right, just on this subject. Accessibility by the public. You talk about, I don't know the areas you're talking about, but my view is, yet again, most high streets are half empty. Why aren't we using some of those so people, when they are in town, they will be able to access them and put their complaints or whatever in? We seem to be, I can only talk with the custody suite in Basingstoke. That's the one I know. Most people don't know it exists, so they wouldn't be going there. They'd need a car to get there, and I think we should be looking at the whole thing. You know, we're trying to get away from people using cars and God knows what else. Public transport is similar, well, maybe not in your areas, but in Basingstoke. When we talked about doctors' surgeries, they built these nice big doctors' surgeries, but no one could get there because they weren't on a bus route. So just those sort of things.
You and I are as one on this one, Tony. I inherited the estate that I have, including the PICs, as big and as expensive and wonderful as they are. And that's because of that command structure, coming back to your previous question, ironically, actually. So because our command structure changed here several years ago, that's why you don't now have custody in your local police station, and it all goes to either Basingstoke or Portsmouth or Southampton, with 36 cells in each of those, and that does change the whole feel and touch of policing, as you're quite rightly saying. My commitment, and I've said this to panel members who were on the panel last year, that absolutely putting the police back on the high street. Pledge number 3, I think it is about increasing visibility, is all about that. So Petersfield, our neighbourhood policing team in Petersfield are currently in Penn's Place in the East Hampshire District Council offices, and Penn's Place is being sold by East Hampshire District Council as their head office for the council, the City Hall, and they are moving to several locations, satellite locations all around their borough, which is a great thing, again, to increase their visibility. So I'm looking at, went and did some site visits last year. I looked at 3 sites in Petersfield Square and the little, I don't know, it's called the Marlins, but like a little shopping bit just off of the square. There's 2 more sites that we're looking at in the next week and the week after. They are all in the town centre in Petersfield, because absolutely I want to have the advertising, the visibility. Here we are, branding, Hampshire Constabulary, come in and speak to us, the door is open. That's the way it should be for neighbourhood policing teams. So trying to do that is key. Fire stations are often in the middle of communities as well. So again, where I can dovetail with the fire brigade, they get a bit of rent from us, they share the utilities with us. I don't have to spend millions of pounds building a new police station, and these are often retained fire stations, so there's hardly anyone in them anyway. So it's a win-win.
Thank you very much. Matt, did you have a question, or has Donna covered it?
I think it was pretty similar to what Tony's just asked around front desks and bringing those into town centres. And it's great to hear your enthusiasm on that, and hopefully we can work with you to make that happen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. In that case, I'm going to go to Tonya.
Okay, thank you. What is the process for operational staff to report concerns to enable the avoidance of adverse incidents, and how are they encouraged to do so?
Police staff. Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
What is the process for operational staff to report concerns to enable the avoidance of adverse incidents, and how are they encouraged to do so?
So do you mean crimes, or just things like operational, if we did this, it would save a whole lot of time not doing that?
I'd probably just... Clearly, we had conversations last year about the condition of some of the estates, Donna.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about general crime reporting. You're talking about estates.
So estates, and we know some of those concerns were held by officers perhaps before others became aware of them.
Sorry, I had my head in crime reporting. Sorry, I now understand in terms of estates issues, yeah. So actually there has been quite a significant change and improvement in that. So before, the estates team in the Opcc were just receiving emails from any random PC, PCSO, police staff member, whichever building they may be in, all of the time, coming in non-stop. It was a bit unmanageable. So now that there is now an agreed process with Hampshire Constabulary, where through them having a couple of officers who are kind of their estates representatives that sit on the estates board, run and chaired by Mike Ottaway, the head of estates for me, and it was a board that I chaired up until about 2-3 months ago. So I gripped the issue last year when I first became PCC, and I knew that there was a number of things that needed to be sorted out. Once the TNI, the testing and inspection regime, had been sorted, and I was happy that we were legally compliant, doing everything we needed to do, I've kind of backed out of that space now, because I don't really need to be there. I'm employing and paying someone, to be my head of estates, and I trust and have absolute confidence that he can do that. So the Hampshire Constabulary team, the Chief Constable's team, have gone on quite a journey in terms of how they're now dealing with this. So they have a central report that, we've got a leaking tap in Basingstoke, we've got a window catch that's broken in Southampton. It goes through, they just have a bit of a sense check. Is this something we can just sort out ourselves? Or if not, it then goes on to the estates team. The estates team do it. It all gets tracked by Hampshire Constabulary and by us to make sure that the data was reported. There is an expectation fed back straight away on how long it might take to get that fixed. We need to get a plumber out. My team would then go to Hampshire County Council to use their, network of electricians, plumbers, window fixers, whatever it might be, and then it all goes back through a channel. So it's much, much more managed now than it previously was. And the feedback I've had from the Hampshire Constabulary estates team is that it's working really well, and everyone's happy with that.
Thank you very much, Donna. That's incredibly reassuring, considering the issues that you discovered last year. So, panel members, I just want to remind us that we have an estate strategy. Are we happy to note the strategy in the document that's in front of us? We are. Thank you very much. Commissioner, I don't think we need you to sit at the front table for the rest of our agenda, so do feel free. Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the team and your first attendance, Pete. So, panel members, we have item 13, the Police and Crime Panel Annual Report on pages 39 and 54. As members, we are presented with a draft annual report for the 2021-22 municipal year. As you'll see that the chair's forward will be added after the draft is agreed by members. Do members have any questions? If so, I will pass them to Caroline. None. In that case, are the panel happy to receive and agree the draft annual report, and that following the meeting, in addition of a forward from myself, the final report be published and circulated to all local authorities in the Hampshire policing? Excellent. Thank you very much. Item 14, the Police and Crime Panel Annual Complaints Report on pages 55 and 60. This report outlines the complaints made against the PCC and the former Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner during the last 12 calendar months. Do members have any comments or questions? No, none. In that case, can I get your agreement that the annual complaints report is noted? Thank you very much. Item 15, we have the Police and Crime Panel's financial monitoring report leading to the 2023-24 grant budget agreement. This is on page 61 and 68. It's a paper from the Finance Officer to the panel, Jonathan Treyer, monitoring the Police and Crime Panel's budget for 2021-22, the part-year performance against the 2022-23 budget, and a proposed budget for the panel for 2023-24. Any questions from members? No, thank you very much. In that case, are we happy to accept the recommendation that the panel notes the financial position for 2021-22, that we note the current performance against the budget for this financial year, agree the revised budget for 2022-23, and agree the proposed budget for the panel for 2023-24, subject to confirmation of the government grant for 2023-24. Are we agreed? Brilliant, thank you very much. Then we come to item 16, which is the Police and Crime Panel Subcommittee Working Group Arrangements, pages 69 and 78. As members, we're presented with a report from the Democratic Services Officer to the panel, and I'm going to invite Caroline to introduce the report.
Previously, you'll be aware that the Police and Crime Panel have operated a subcommittee to look at complaints, and then 3 working groups, one which focused on police and crime plan delivery, one which supported financial scrutiny, and a third which looked at equality and diversity. And the proposal through this report is to combine the 3 working groups under a new heading, under a new working group. Apologies, I've lost my computers and I have all the information in front of me at the moment, but a new policy and performance working group, which will encompass all 3 elements, and that was based on feedback both from members in the public meeting and privately, and also through comment from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office that there was quite a lot of cross practice between the working groups, and it will enable all the updates to come to one meeting, and all elements of those updates to be fully considered through that working group. So the proposal in front of you is to continue with the complaints subcommittee and to implement a new working group to look at plan and performance. There is a slight suggested change to the wording on page 76, which is under the objectives, which is the first paragraph under number 4. The reason for the change to that wording is that the Opcc helpfully has drawn attention to some updated wording from the Home Office. So the paragraph has the same intention, it's just to align the wording with that from the recent Home Office guidance. So if I read that out, Chairman, would you be happy to then seek agreement and we can agree that within the recommendations? So the updated wording is to scrutinise the budget and how it reflects the priorities of the police and crime plan. Key activities may include reviewing and receiving update against the medium-term financial strategy and in-year financial performance, and scrutinising the financial impact of any significant projects or activity.
We're all happy? Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And members, if you're happy to progress with the Complaints Subcommittee and Plan and Performance Working Group is outlined within the papers and their attached terms of reference. I'll hand over to the Chairman to seek interest in membership of the Working Group and Subcommittee.
Lovely, thank you very much, Caroline. So we've, ahead of today's meeting, sought interest from members for the working groups, and the following members have put their names forwards. So for the Complaints Subcommittee, we have Dave Stewart as an independent co-opted member. We have Councillor Joanne Bull as a Conservative, Councillor Leslie Minahan as a Conservative, Councillor Tony Jones as Labour, and that leaves us with one Lib Dem vacancy, which rules some of us out.
Chairman, I think we'd better consult.
Brilliant.
Would you ping an email out, please, Caroline, to the Lib Dem members so that we sort ourselves out?
Thank you. Yes, I'd be happy to. We would then need to agree that appointment at the next meeting. So we would carry a vacancy in the subcommittee until our next meeting in October. Thank you.
Unless anybody wants to volunteer now.
We've got a volunteer from Stuart.
I think that's an excellent choice, Chairman.
I thought you'd say that, Margot. Excellent.
Thank you, Stuart.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Always difficult in the live meeting, Stuart. You did that almost without any look of pressure at all. Brilliant, thank you very much. For the Policy and Performance Working Group, we have 5 vacancies. We only have 2 volunteers at the moment, which is Margot and Matthew. I'm quite happy to put myself on that list as well to make 3. So we have another 2. Dave McKinney. So it's just one more. Oh. Jeff? Oh, we can take up to 7. It's not limited, so we can take both Jeff and Narinda. And what we'll do is we'll carry one extra vacancy because I'm just conscious we won't have everybody with us. Sorry, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm very conscious. I suspect Shirley might want to be on that panel.
So if we carry one vacancy, we can then appoint at the next meeting if everybody's happy with that. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So as far as the recommendation, unless Caroline needs to do something before I do this, no. The proposed recommendation is that the panel agree the continuation of the Complaints Subcommittee and the introduction of a Policy and Performance Working Group for the 2022-23 municipal year in accordance with the terms of reference with the agreed amendments set out in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 of this report, that the panel agrees the membership. Caroline, would you like to read it out?
So for the Complaints Subcommittee, the membership is confirmed as Dave Stewart, as independent co-opted member, would take the role of chairman in accordance with the terms of reference. Councillor Joanne Bull, Councillor Leslie Minahan, Councillor Tony Jones and Councillor Stuart Bailey. And for the Policy and Performance Working Group, Councillor Margot Power, Councillor Matthew Renyard, Councillor Simon Bound, Councillor Dave McKinney, Councillor Jeff Blunden and Councillor Narinda Baines, with a vacancy to be carried to the next meeting. Thank you.
And that's for the working group for the 2022-23 municipal year, and that the terms of reference for a task and finish group to review and pre-scrutinise the Commissioner's proposed precept annually be considered at the next meeting of the panel in October. Are we all agreed? Thank you very much. So then for our last item, which is item 17, the Police and Crime Panel work programme on pages 79 and 84. The future work programme for the panel for this municipal year is outlined on these pages. Do members have any questions, which I will pass to Caroline if you do? No, in that case, are we happy to accept the work programme? We are, thank you very much. In that case, that's the end of the meeting, and if I could just call for the webcast to be stopped, and I'll just check that that's happened.